Right. Oh, all of them do. Shit, just when I thought I found one. She checked the list again. I'll take the meat platter to eat here if you please, and a box to go. I doubt a little guy like myself could eat it all. Thank you, young man. The strange man returned his menu and adjusted the cloth over his eyes. He wasn't a big guy, but what he had was toned. He also sounded familiar. Quote. Can I help you, miss? She snapped out of staring and came up with something. You eat here before. Anything good? Quote. You like carrots? The steak is pretty good, but it's pretty expensive. If you're on a budget, roast beef comes with it too, and some mashed potatoes. Good for protein. He scratched his chin, smiling. Quote. Yeah, sure. Roast beef, tates, and carrots. She handed off the menu and pulled out her phone, casting a glance at the man who took out a notebook and began to write. His pencil seemed to dance across the page with how quickly he wrote, so interesting it distracted her from messaging her hero manager, but most things would do that. Paint drying could distract her from messaging that chick. Eventually, she got to it, and her food came. She ate slowly, not thinking too much of it. Carrots were alright, a little soggy, but the seasoning was a nice surprise. She kept taking glances at the other man and his strange fashion sense. His food hadn't come yet, and he seemed kind of focused, muttering constantly to himself. He wore arm and leg guards, plus she could see that there was something black and slightly shiny under the armor. He wore some kind of boots, but everything else was obscured. His hair was a mess, and his hat looked like something out of a samurai flick. Plus, that weird black cloth bandana bandaging stuff over his eyes looked weird. She could have sworn she'd heard him somewhere before. That voice was pretty familiar. She ate slowly, trying to figure out where. She could try putting what she knew about him together. He probably lived somewhere near here and she hadn't been in Musudafu for a while. Either they used to go to the same place at the same time, like going to the same school, or he was someone she met recently. His armor kept his fingers free for some reason, and his boots didn't exactly look heavy. Quote. Are you a hero? She pointed her fork at him, but he was distracted by the arrival of his food. Thank you, sir, excellent as always. He began to dish himself food excitedly, paring up most of his food into bite-sized sections to eat multiple bits before grabbing with his chopsticks and dipping in the sauce, this time interrupted by her. Hey, oops, little too loud. Quote. Have we met before? Of course, you're Maruko. Number 7 hero. I'm surprised you remember me. He laughed and smiled, then finished his bite. Most people might not know your number, but almost everyone knows who you are. He chuckled again and grabbed another piece, dipping it and eating happily. She nodded, since it made sense in her head, and continued eating. Sorry, that was rude. I just thought you might be a villain, or a hero, or something. With that outfit, you know. She really had been getting in the guy's business. It was a long day, and she needed some relief. Maybe she could use UA's gym and beat off the stress. It's fine, ma'am. I'm glad to see you here though. There have been reports of a vigilante running around, you know. The man leaned forward, sighing. Some drug dealers run their show down by the old subway, but every time that Ronin guy shows up, they keep beefing up security, and he keeps showing up. Should be at around 10 tonight. He took another bite before continuing. I get you're in the top 10, but you shouldn't be around there at that time. As far as I recall, you're not bulletproof. He continued in his notes as she replied, so what? 10:00 backwood clock. I'll go there, beat the whole lot of them. You, shop guy, beer, 1. She could take a beer glass before fighting. She had a while before she had to go to the old subway. Wait. Maruko leaned to the man. Pissed. Where's the old subway? 2 blocks to the left after exiting the building. 4 blocks to the right after that. Do you need street names, Ms.? He stopped to take another bite, looking at her slightly now. He had a scar on one eye, barely visible from under the bandaging. Whoa, no sorry. Shit, what's your name, old man? He just exuded old man vibes. The slight stubble, the way he referred to everyone as if they were younger than him, even his slow eating. He was a little further along than her in her meal, but she was texting, talking, and eating. Quote. I am Ken. Ken can mean sword or fist, generally striking object like in Kendo or Kenjutsu and GT. Ken object to hit thing plus Jitsu art equals the martial art of hitting things with an object. He gave a slight bow as he introduced himself. Do be careful, Ms. Your plate is losing the potatoes. My plate is. Ah, shit. She scooped the falling potatoes with a hand as both ordered their checks. Ronin was trying not to die. Not from criminals, from heroes, or even giant quirk bears. He swore to God, he was going to die from laughter. How was Maruko this stupid? It was the most suspicious shit ever, and she trusted him. He didn't even look that old, yet she just followed him like his words were the safest thing in the world. Was the thing about a drug cartel in the old subway true? Sure, he knew about them and took a detour every Friday. He had a few spare minutes to harass them, but getting a real legal hero and some cops there would be a good way to put a permanent stop to it though. Ronin sat, trying not to fall off the rooftop from laughing too hard, overlooking a very confused Maruko who didn't realize that the old subway was abandoned and had been locked and boarded up. He only found out about them because he wanted to use the subway as a base, but found some of their things down there. The locals didn't know where the drug dealers went, but they knew when. Put it all together and he was flying. He fought this gang before on the streets and in the subway. They were getting smarter, less and less quirks, more and more guns. They were harder to dodge. Tonight though, with Maruko as the battering ram, their little castle was about to collapse. Ronin planned to do this in a week when he was fully kitted, but now was a fine time. He went back, switched into his full outfit, and put all the weapons back into this costume. He now rested the sword's pommel against his shoulder, holding it by the middle. The street lights were on. It was a beautiful night with the crescent moon over them. The stars were obscured by the city lights, but that was fine. A gray sky suited this phantom. Maruko was pretty sure she was in the right area but became positive when she found 2 guys tied together with their shoelaces around their wrists, back to back outside an open door for what she thought might have been a subway. Signs of intrusion. Great, free entry. She couldn't go in without plausible cause, and a break-in was good enough. She phoned in her manager and gave her location, then headed inside without waiting for backup. The others would take too long, and she really just wanted the cops so they could handcuff everyone. That saved her some time, at least. She ran down the stairs and jumped over the ticket booth, eyeing more and more unconscious villains. There were supposed to be heavily armed, but she hadn't seen a gun yet, let alone heard one. In a place that echoed this much, that was impressive. Maruko could hear Ronin, running further down, then stopping suddenly. She ran after him, taking huge bounding strides until she reached the first platform and hit the barrier. A blue wall covered the entrance to the first platform, and no sound was getting through. Everyone seemed to focus on the ceiling, but from her perspective, she could see Ronin creeping through the shadows and hitting them from behind before disappearing again into the corners. She tapped the wall twice, content it wasn't going to hit back with as much force as she put in, then began to obliterate it with her leg in 3 kicks. It cracked, it dented, and finally, it explosively gave out. Everyone turned toward her when the glass shattered, but she wasn't worried about their guns. Maruko dashed into the closest villain and tackled him into the wall, then lifted him up and drop-kicked him into another villain. They were a mess of missing, hitting the wrong person, or reloading. To top everything off, Ronin picked up the pace. Guns that might have shot Maruko swerved as the gunners got hit with needles, and in return people getting a little too aware of the thing in the shadows got kicked into the walls. Under 2 minutes, and there was only one guy left, who'd taken another villain hostage. Don't come any closer. I mean it, 1, 2, 10 needles hit the guy's arm and he flinched, letting her kick him in the face. You know, I think we should skip the small talk and fight, right now. Did you bring anyone? Ronin slid from the shadows in a natural and calm walk and started rounding up the drugs, stacking them neatly. He didn't bother to look at her. The hero codebook states someone needs to supervise obtained drugs, and I'm not a hero. Did you bring anyone else to secure the drugs? He finished searching and started grabbing guns, not waiting for her answer. Fuck. I figured. He finished, holding up a rifle and muttering as he removed the clip, then tried aiming down the sights. Since you made this go loud, security will be higher. There are 2 more platforms until the big boss and 1 more after that. When will the police get here? 30 minutes no, that was when this started. 25 minutes. That information would help him, but there was only one exit. She wasn't scared, there was no way he was getting past her. Instead of trying to leave, he laughed. Well then, that's 25 minutes to take down an entire drug cartel and look like you never left the room. He added the new guns to his bag. You ready? Ronin finished pushing the rolling cart into position, then gave a slight bow and gesture to Maruko. On your signal. Whatever, it's on 3 anyway. 1, 2, 3. They both kicked the cart into the next room with their own styles of kicks, ramming 3 goons distracting everyone. Then they entered, crashing into opponents. Maruko jumped around, still only using her quirk to fight, while Ronin never bothered to unsheath. It was clear who was superior in strength, but it was reversed for power. Maruko might hit harder, but Ronin seemed to dance through bullets and people alike with his strikes, not even flinching when shot. By the end of the second room, Ronin clearly had a majority of the takedowns when he stopped fighting from the shadows. You really were holding back. Ronin laughed, shaking his head. Let's see you fight in top shape after running in circles for 5 hours. He hadn't either, but he wanted to undermine Ronin's power as much as possible. The surprise attack was good, and the cart is still in shape. Do you want to use that tactic again? Is all you ever think about fighting? Do I know you? Are we related? This seemed to be the most inquisitive Maruko had ever been. Ronin gestured for her to continue, and she finally answered the question. Yeah sure, but the cart is too light. We should put something in it. Ronin stopped in his gun collecting. A good idiano, a great idea. I was limiting myself in our tactics. Thank you Maruko, this next one shall go even smoother. By the time we hit the final room, we should be done in under a minute. Ronin lined up the next kick. Let me know how this goes afterward. I might not hear when in combat, and I want good notes over this tactic. Shut up and kick the damn thing. Maruko snarled, annoyed that she couldn't do anything at first. Ronin stretched his legs, activating the boots to push, and felt the third, accidental, effect of the bodysuit. The muscles outside his body tensed and relaxed with his, repeating the action of the muscles underneath them, in this case, his. They functioned like they were still alive, and had boosted his strength considerably. If only he made his bodysuit out of all the bare muscles. A future project. Focus now for victory later. He jumped into the air and anchored a hand in the wall on either side of himself, bringing his knees into his chest and doing 2 pushing front kicks simultaneously. His goblet's pull kept him anchored in place, and the cart rolled straight into the next room, running down 2 goons before crashing into a wall. After that, he let go off the walls and rushed in, striking quickly to crush anyone trigger-happy enough to be a threat to his wonderful helper. There were no radios in this operation and little cell service underground, so the communication was done in person by messengers. Problem was, the cart was designed to run over the messenger so he couldn't get away. Not that Maruko knew Ronin had slacked a little on that first kick, wanting to make sure it hit him. What she didn't know wouldn't hurt her, or at least, that specific little tidbit wouldn't. Soon everyone was focused on the mobile midget running around like his pants were on fire, and no one noticed the heroine rise from the cart and tackling a nearby henchman. They had switched positions, with her now being the stealthy one while he caught everyone's attention with a mix of martial arts, needles, and sheath strikes. In the end, it really was under a minute, and this wasn't even the final one. Ronin began applying first aid to those who'd been shot, the first time anyone had seriously taken damage from these guns tonight, while Maruko stretched. The stairs were annoying as shit. And the crashing into a wall was a bitch. Put more cushion in next time, otherwise, I'll get knocked out by your idea instead of the actual fight. Ronin nodded, tearing up some seat cushions and arranging them inside the cart. Well then, if that's all your complaints, ready for the big one. Ronin rolled the cart along while Maruko stretched. Her shoulders probably hurt after that rough stop. Big one. These small fries. She scoffed. You're the big one, genius. I'm only doing this to kill time. Ronin laughed, leaning on the cart. If you think I'm the big one, I don't think you have an appreciation for guns and the thugs who use them. I'm not going to try and kill you. These guys. He nodded to the many people strewn around, tied up and now helpless. Every fight can be the big one with our good friend 44 Magnum. Maruko didn't really have a comeback for that, but she could at least end the conversation as they moved the cart up and down another flight of stairs. They stopped at another entrance, where she could see a much larger crowd just beyond the gates. Ronin lined up the cart with the package entrance and leaned on it again, looking at her expectantly. She snorted, slightly annoyed, before hopping in and throwing a blanket over herself so no one would see her. She could feel the jostle of the kick, and off she and the cart went, to places currently unknown. Chapter End Notes. A basic rundown on the bodysuit, which is still unnamed, and all its actual functions, covers the entire body except fingers. Blackish gray, reflective, still looks like muscle. The other equipment locks into it, regenerates when damaged unless burnt, melted, absorbs some impact of all attacks to recharge battery, regenerate accidental super strength, not at the level of a full bear but more than a human. On to the actual chapter. Ronin does have a disguise, ripped straight off from Batman Year 1 down to the scar. Ronin does buy dinner for himself sometimes, and I'm keeping his favorite meat overall pork, the same meat that's in Katsudon. I like writing Maruko since she's so violent. It gives a nice distinction between the usually calm and reserved Ronin and makes her a closer hero rival than Bakugo since they barely see each other. I enjoyed writing the bar scene and was heavily tempted to have her figure out who he was, but they only spoke once when he wore almost an entirely different costume. I figured that'd be a little too smart for her. These casual fights go pretty quickly, but most fights you either win or lose quickly when there are no rules or regulations to hold you back. Fast facts, the bodysuit and Kevlar can stop bullets, but the Force can still leave bruises and break bones. Ronin might look fine, but he basically specializes in pretending he's not in extreme pain at this point. Short chapter, short summary. All in all, short talk for short times. Why not? Shorts are comfy and easy to wear. Chapter 46. Chapter 46. Chapter summary. Ronin finds and eggs on Maruko into a pseudo-alliance to destroy a drug cartel that picked up after Toxin Lover's collapse. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Ronin drove the cart into the room and sprinted after it, not bothering to check how many people it took down. Guns and quirks activated with a target, his dumb ass. Ronin shoulder checked the first goon and ran with him, using the man as a shield until crashing into a second target. He ditched the first bodyguard for the next, punting his old shield into more goons. There were over 50 goons at the start, and some of these guys had real superpowers, not the garbage of most schmucks. Ronin lifted his new friend with one hand as he ran, blocking the bullets to the best of his ability. He had to count down from 30 for Maruko to come out of the cart, 20 if she got impatient like last time. As he ran along the wall to only be attacked from one side, his fist regularly drilled into the current shield's face until he no longer seemed conscious, grabbing the goon with both hands to get a good grip before lobbing him at another two and taking 2 bullets. They couldn't pierce his defenses, but they still hurt like hell, and there would definitely be bruises come morning. Ronin used the momentum and his old footwork, sliding along the ground like an ice skater back to his first human shield and the goons he knocked over, flipping right over them and kicking 2 of the sucker upright with a back-to-back series of side kicks. They only covered up to his thighs but took a barrage nicely. Minor reinforcement quirks were very common, even if it wasn't what your quirk directly did. Ronin was up to 10 seconds now, and he could see some of the men were packing up the bags to make their exit. Here were the smart people who knew when to run. The needles came out, driving into wrists and ankles and stopping runaways in their tracks, or forced them to drop what they were holding. Ronin couldn't pause to admire his handiwork though and kept on throwing, forcing some to drop their guns, others to drop their suitcases. He focused on the ones who using things that could be dangerous to Maruko when she came into the picture. Men that seemed more like the bears in Alaska than humans charged him, swinging fists and trying to tackle him, a variety of strange quirks activated. Ronin opted to dodge instead of run, letting it become a crossfire where goon shot goon and quirk hit quirk. With no allies to accidentally hit, it served him well. Finally, his own fist fighter and ally did enter the equation. They didn't notice her because she went straight for the leader, a spinning axe kick driving him into the ground and probably crushing a few bones. From there on out there was no stopping. The duo danced, tearing through the goons. Ronin knocked the goons around with his gun, spinning through a mess of limbs and bullets forcing the gang to break itself apart. Maruko forced them to keep fighting without slowing down, triggering mistakes that got them down. All in all, 3 minutes. Ronin hummed as he held up an unused shotgun. Looks like they also might have been arms dealers too. I'll leave this with you for when the coppers pull in. You'll be right there too, wise guy. She snarled, unconscious and in anti-quirk cuffs, so you can't run anywhere. Quote. So sure you'll win. He checked the cart and moved around the cushions and suitcases that stopped stray bullets. Quote. You learn any martial arts yet? If you have, you could have fooled me. Not everyone needs some fancy tricks or teammates to win. She snorted. I could bulldoze this place down on my own, with or without any of your stupid tricks. Quote. I see. Then you don't want to use the cart technique in the last room. He gestured to the cart he'd been setting up for the final room. Could have led with that, saved us both some time. Fine. Fu tilde you tilde ck. She really did turn cursing and cussing into an art. Maybe I'll use the cart technique in our fight to run your smug ass over. Understandable. Please get in now, and run my smug ass over later. He had finished the last line up for the cart kick and was smiling underneath the helmet. This was going to be good. Into the room Maruko went, ramming against 3 people before coming to a stop. Visibility was non-existent, but she could hear the gunshots and needles being thrown. She was supposed to wait till 30 seconds had passed, but she hadn't yet and didn't plan to start at the end. At 25 seconds she jumped out to find 2 goons with pins in them, 3 more on the floor, 30 looking at her, a suspiciously closed gate at the entrance, and a very high lack of Ronin. If you listened very closely, you could hear the gears turning in her head until the last wire snapped. Ronin. Ronin heard her scream from the second room as he sprinted away. True to his word, he helped her take down the drug cartel. So what if all he did for the last room was line her up as far from the door as possible, kick her in and throw 3 needles? He tried to contain his laughter as he left the subway and hit the roads. 30 minutes. The hell was going down at the police station, a birthday party. He could run there in 20. This win had practically been handed to him, and he barely had to do anything. Ronin went from the subway to the streets to the sewers in nearly 5 seconds. It had been his intended escape route the whole time, but the whole thing had worked way better than he ever intended. Along the concrete tubes he knew so well, he flew like a sparrow. He could move miles in minutes in this place and stop needing the map so much. It was quite impressive if a little disheartening for his hobbies. Midoriya switched clothes in the school bathroom, finally breaking down into laughter. How could someone be so stupid? They were enemies, and she just accepted a plan that involved her sitting around for 30 seconds. He might have been completely gone if she did wait for the full 30. She really was unstoppable, not even she could see where she was going. All it took was a few nudges, and she did all of the paperwork and got all the responsibility for everything he did. He headed home, still laughing all the way. Gangs on the streets reported the return of the psychopath, the vigilante who laughed as he tore people to shreds with his needles. They never saw him, but they could hear him, echoing across the streets, always somewhere just out of sight. Midoriya got to see her on the news, and the news reports of Ronin as he checked the leather for his new jacket. At best, it took only 16 hours to cure, and it looked pretty close to him. He began to design the layout for his new jacket, not bothering with the old one. It was good, but he wanted the new one to actually fit him. He had measured himself with Eiko, although she just thought he was going to be making a shirt or something. But now, he had all the measurements he'd need to create his all-new jacket. Still unnamed. Should the jacket and the bodysuit share a name? They did come from the same creature and share most of each other's properties. Irrelevant. He pulled out the demo piece of leather and started cutting it to form, letting his mind wander as he cut. He wanted to test his new items against something other than the guns of Musudafu. A highly defensive item was good, and he had two. The bruises from the bullets testified to that. He adjusted the light, running his head against the ideas that came up. He didn't want to fight a hero, but they were some of the most documented people he had. Even now he still took some notes on them. His knife danced with his thoughts, cutting the leather to form. There was a problem with Musudafu. A major one, maybe even a huge one. It was too close to Yue. Ronin was the second biggest criminal in Musudafu as of last night, and there wasn't anything to test himself against. He had been trying to find something to hone his skills with. Mao was too random. Sometimes, fights turned into life or death struggles. Sometimes, Mao ran headfirst off a cliff and beat himself for Ronin. Maruko didn't have the skill. It was like fighting All Might, the power gap was too great to be done safely. She'd just flail around until she beat him, which was why he cheated every fight they ever got into. They'd trade blows all right, he just wouldn't be delivering enough force, even with the new suit. It was like trying to crack a wall with a hammer. He could swing all he wanted, but his iron hammer couldn't break a steel wall. Her defense, and offense for that matter, were way higher than his. There was no point in fighting her unless he wanted to practice tricking people. Someone below Maruko. He didn't want someone famous, but he did know of someone. He checked his stitches, then tried on the partially completed prototype and made notes, where was too tight, where was too loose, what needed to stay, and what needed to go. A few flips later, and he tried redesigning the coat. It wouldn't be amazing, but he ripped off a combination of his old coat, video game coats, and real-world coats. His pride and joy were that there were cosplay coats he could use and that he eagerly ripped off. He ripped off tons of people. Assassin's Creed for that hood, Dante and Virgil for the open look and detail work, Bane's for interior although he sort of had to do that one, with the material he had on hand. All in all, it was fun for him. The hood could be locked up or down so it didn't get in his way, a problem faced by people parkouring in Assassin's Creed outfits some 150-odd years ago. The fur, originally wool, in Bane's actual coat kept him warm and served to cushion blows. Dante's and Virgil's long coattails stayed out of the way as he moved, letting him dance across the rooftops as he pleased. He'd dye the final version, at least a little bit. It was too clean, too shiny otherwise. Sticking out was not something he wanted to do in his career. Midoriya withdrew the real piece, and with his adjusted forms, focused solely on the final product. This was where that concentration that got him through school, life, and Bakugo came into its own. He wasn't sure he wanted to keep working, but he needed to. He forced himself to, knowing that a little discomfort here would lead to more time to hunt later. Would the dye color maybe give away who he was? Probably. Still, he put minor green accents into the leatherworking. The stitches, the cloth fabric that didn't come from the bear, a little bit of dye in some parts of the leather like the rims and inside. Still didn't put a logo though. Heroes had logos, companies had logos, villains had signature methods. And as much as he liked heroes, vigilantes were criminals, and that made him a villain to society. As dumb as the term villain was. He finished up the final rendition of the new leather jacket. It had its internal lining of a gel vest, recently stolen. Maruko hadn't questioned what he nicked off those goons in the subway last night, or why so many people weren't dying from gunshots. The gel vest was designed to disperse and slow down the impacts, and he had cut up several to place throughout his new jacket, removing the bits with bullet holes in them. With the iron leather, there shouldn't be any more bullets getting through them. His main problem had been heavy impacts. Now, he donned the finished piece. It was heavy without the tools he'd be fitting it with, like his kanabo or needles. He'd guess 9 kilos, easily 20 pounds. It didn't get in the way too much due to it locking onto the bodysuit at the hips, shoulders, and neck. Other than the weight, it was easy to move in, and with his new bodysuit, the weight wasn't that much of an issue. Now all he needed was his pants, something for the needles, and maybe the others too. He put up his uniform tired but satisfied with the final result and headed homeward bound. It had been a satisfying day. Sunday was fun. He told his mom in advance he'd be recording the footage of the UA Sports Festival so he could watch it slowed down, which was true. The big event for him was happening tonight. He scouted it out in civilian duds yesterday, just to make sure his plan was possible. His mom knew he didn't have anything tomorrow, so he was allowed to stay out late. He said he was going to a friend's place, and might get back before she woke up. Technically true, who was a better friend to him than Ronin? He checked all his notes. Every night, before the meditation and stretching, he did his notes. Not just over heroes, villains and rumors he heard were now added to the mix. Things he heard in class and on the streets that he'd write down in the moment got organized and sorted here. The ramblings became coherent when placed together. Truth and rumor split and left him with facts. He liked facts, they were something he could work with. And now, he had some good rumors and was pulling good facts from them. Famous criminals were surrounded by information, it was his job to sort through the fake news and find those facts he loved so much. Heroes, villains, even vigilantes hated him, despite the man in question technically being one of them. His kill rate was high, almost 100%. He was the literal opposite of Ronin, and they seemed destined to come to blows. His victims hadn't struggled when they died. They each had a few minor wounds, then the killing blow, the coup de grace. It seemed his quirk did something that stopped the body, but it wasn't clear what. Sleeping agent, paralysis, stunning, a mental disconnection, whatever it wasn't instant otherwise he wouldn't need to damage his prey early. So many options, but not enough information. He'd save the theories for another day. Ronin set down the notes and hit the road. Technically the first step was the batteries. Everything was restocked in full. This wasn't really part of the costume though, making it step 0. The bodysuit was zipped up. He did some minor stretches to make sure he was fine to move in them. With his fingers through and suit sealed to his body, step 1 was finished. The pants went on. His baggy cargos had long been replaced for still baggy but lighter pants. Over that went his first belt and the bulletproof shorts. The straps tightened around his hips and thighs to ensure easy movement, and step 2 was finished. Still on his lower half, he tucked in the ends of his pants into the boots and locked them in place, moving his toes to make sure it was still comfortable. The wiring for the boots was hidden inside the baggy pants and was now attached on either side of his leg. He adjusted his first belt, the one for gauntlets and boots, then added the external straps to secure everything and add more points of attachment. Step 3 was finished. The shin plating was added quickly, first the back of the legs then the front. The pieces locked into the boot, the straps, and each other. He gave a test activation to make sure it was all working well, then moved on. Step 4 was finished. His legs done, he checked his coat. It wasn't as wide, didn't flap in the wind. The image of a hero's cape was further away. Still, the jacket went on, locking to his body and connecting up to the electrical signal. The bodysuit and the jacket activated together, which was good since the jacket had most of the batteries. Took a lot of energy to work the regeneration function. He rolled up the sleeves and grabbed his gauntlets since step 5 was finished. The gauntlets now had a clasp, mainly for keeping the sleeves out of the way. He moved his wrists as he tightened the pieces, then added the armor. He could feel the pressure as he activated one, the wiring he added inside the coat working as well as the last one did. Looking down at his hands, he nodded. Step 6 had been finished. The weapons he crafted came off the table. A moment to contemplate each of them, the time he spent with each. The ones he'd replace, the ones he already replaced. Each went into its place. On his pants, in his jacket. Finally, he tied the sword to his belt and rose to the last item. Step 7 had finished. There was a figure in the reflection of that black mask. He was no longer sure who it was. Ronin, Midoriya, it didn't matter. Whoever they were, they tied their longish green mop into a braid and donned the mask, sealing it in all emotions. This would require focus. It rose, quietly cutting through the floor. It wouldn't touch the floor again until they climbed from those sewers at the train station, settling in on the outside of the train to Hosu. It closed their eyes, clearing the mind and honing in on what they were about to do, what they had to do. Ronin opened his eyes. Step 8 was finished. Chapter End Notes. And you thought I did midnight dirty, she was getting off easy. So far. Ronin fighting Maruko didn't benefit him, so he bailed. The jacket is replaced, and boy is it confusing to describe. Maybe there will be a picture of it someday, probably not. The next arc arrived. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 47. Chapter 47. Chapter Summary. Across the world, eyes focus on Japan for their annual UA Sports Festival. Across Japan, children and adults alike discuss this year's rising heroes coming together in Musudafu. But in Hosu, two nameless blades cross and begin the sword dance that would someday split the heavens. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. The sun was just past the buildings when the train rolled into the station. He had researched the sewers in advance, not even needing to go in person anymore to the archives to see the sewer plans. Technology really had aided vigilantism just as much as heroism and villainy, if you knew where to look. The sun cast strange shadows. Some people in Hosu even thought that they saw glimpses of Musudafu's number 2 vigilante jumping around their city. Obvious delusions, even to the small crowd that knew what Ronin looked like. Ronin didn't operate anywhere near here, what would he be doing in Hosu? The shade took off down concrete corridors as if he was in his own town. Sewers were built on rules, and if you knew them, you could exploit them. You could find the above world's map if you knew the below world's rules well enough. Ronin wondered almost every day why more people didn't travel through the sewers well, not normal people. Heroes and vigilantes would get around more easily and safely if they didn't have to announce their presence. Almost every building had plumbing these days, and for him, that was a free entrance. That wasn't how Stain got around though. He seemed to take the usual method of rooftops and streets, implying he had good maneuverability. Midoriya learned his lesson about concluding early. Was still learning all that mattered was Stain was a pretty agile serial killer. Making them similar to him. The killing blows all seemed to come from swords. A bit dramatic when a knife or pillow would have worked just fine, but hey, he didn't want to give a serial killer ideas. Ronin made himself familiar with the routes he'd be taking. He might have looked at home, but seeing it on a map and being there were separate matters. He kept the time, then laid out his theories of how to actually find the guy. The police couldn't do it, but they were pretty useless these days. Forget whether or not they were shooting the right or wrong people, they didn't shoot anyone, arrest anyone, or even investigate anyone these days. The only law they enforced was the law of gravity. Heroes weren't detectives. Their training wasn't pursuing criminals who had already escaped, it was about punching criminals and calling them stupid names. Problem was, that was what Ronin was good at too. Midoriya had a sharp mind, but learning to effectively track took a lot of training and even more practice. He did know a few things, so he could try his hand at being Musudafu's budding new junior detective. With an office in the sewers, because his superiors hated him or something. Stain is, or was, a vigilante. He operated in the afternoons, probably because of a morning job. Rooftops and streets were the ways he got around. He operated alone. If he wanted to know about something, he had to research it on his own. Working off of him being a vigilante gave Ronin some starting ground. He next had to identify Stain's motive. Ronin's was local crime that could be solved with violence, and if you knew his area and information, you could follow the logic to figure out where he'd strike next. Stain had his own method to pick targets, Midoriya just didn't know what it was. He could take a few guesses though off of the info he already had at least. Heroes were Stain's main targets, along with the occasional unfortunate criminal who crossed him. There weren't any reports of vigilantes who died to Stain so far, and if there were any who he had killed he never found. Stain's views on vigilantes weren't something Ronin was eager to test though. With heroes as a focal point, the question became about why. What connected the heroes he killed? Most were high income, working multiple jobs well, calling them jobs was being generous. They all seemed to bank on heroism, even if they only had one job. They banked on heroism to bring in money, even in their other jobs. Not just as a way of getting by, but as an actual selling point. Abusing their heroism to get privileges, being in shady allegations out of Stain's pile of victims, every single one Ronin had good info on wasn't a real hero. The world wasn't missing much for most of them, just people who viewed heroism as just a way to get rich or famous quickly. As a solution, murder was a little far but those fates should never have been allowed to become heroes in the first place. Working off Stain's motivation from the abuse of power angle, it just became a guessing game of which hero he might strike next. If Stain stuck to one city, he was going to run out of heroes eventually, and by Midoriya's math it seemed that should happen sometime next week at the hero killer's current pace. Most of Stain's marks were fairly similar with a few outliers, but if he expanded his definition of bad heroes it could make a sort of sense. Twisted sense, but sense nevertheless. Hero lineages, family lines whose family business was being heroes, seemed to be included in his list of targets, and a quick check to the hero news told of a hero he hadn't attacked yet. So, the Ingenium Hero Agency was the best place to start. It wasn't like he was on a time crunch. As cruel as it sounded, it didn't matter that much if heroes died. They all signed up for this, death was just a part of the job. Civilians didn't get that chance, and it was a hero's job to keep them safe. Plus, he didn't really care that much about the heroes being killed. That detachment allowed him to fight against heroes, but it meant he didn't really care what happened as much anymore. The overhyped hero news, the merchandising, the showboating, none of it mattered as much anymore. But those thoughts were irrelevant. Right now, he was searching for something he was certain to happen because every successful person did it. Stain should be researching his prey. Ronin had found Ingenium's usual route by researching where fans spotted him. Following the time they posted pictures of Ingenium and the locations in the pictures, he could make a rough guess about the hero's usual route. Did raise some question about how he ran into the speedster last time in Musudafu, but he lived right next to Yua High School. Heroes coming to visit wasn't ridiculous, coming in for collab missions. The past had passed though, and Ingenium came out of his agency for his last patrol of the day. Ronin scanned the area for possible targets, then followed behind. A tailor would need line of sight, but Ronin knew the route already, and he was trying to tail a tailor. Ronin didn't bother starting on the ground. From what he heard, rooftops would be a better starting position. Ronin tailed behind Ingenium's route, 2 blocks behind the speedster. When heroes were on patrol, they tended to walk slower to greet fans and project a calm or confident air. Normally, Ingenium's long stride would squash Ronin's shorter ones, but with his casual pace keeping up wasn't so difficult. They moved across the building's rooftops, always following the same direction. They were only separated by a single road most times, both trailing the same man. The 2 revenants slowly noticed the other, stalking the same prey. One was clad in black, with tinges of green. His outfit was heavy, and his weapons concealed except for his sword, shown off at his hip. His top half was compact, while the bottom of his outfit flitted about in the wind like a cape. One was clad in black, with accents of red. His outfit was light, and his weapons obvious, save for the sword on his back, barely showing over his shoulder. His lower half was mostly uncomplicated, especially compared to his top, a mess of knives and cloth, with red and brownish-white cloth drifting in the breeze. Their gazes crossed, and both stopped in their spot as they faced each other down. Ingenium was losing them, but neither was thinking about him anymore. A bit of trash flew between them, then they were gone. Ronin leapt off the building and teleport-slashed his way to the same side of the street as Stain, who took off running. The fight didn't do anything for Stain, so why fight? The difference between Stain and Evenmao was terrifying to behold. Ronin's needles were dodged like they were softballs thrown by a toddler. In exchange, he lobbed a knife with much better precision. Ronin might have been able to throw at what he wanted, but Stain could hit whatever he wanted. The difference might only sound like wording, but as the knife struck Ronin's bodysuit, he began to appreciate the little details like that. Stain was literally decked from head to toe in sharp objects. His quirk might do something with stabbing or cutting, but maybe that was the style he was most familiar with. Better to use martial arts than something signature, but Ronin didn't know what poison he used to paralyze people. If he did use poison, it'd make more sense to pick a poison that would kill people outright instead of using a weapon. Did send a message, though. The knife couldn't penetrate his armor, despite how accurate it was. Ronin was safe in the knowledge that, at range, the best Stain could do was give him bruises if even. Stain was physically his better, but by teleport slashing, he caught up. He phased in behind him and slashed once with his sword, testing Stain's traditional defense. Once again, Stain dodged, but this time built more distance than Ronin thought possible with a series of jumps, landing atop an old exhaust pipe. Quote. You're not a hero from Hosu. I need to purge Ingenium, but you. More needles interrupted him. Ronin attacked while he talked. I need to train against strong opponents to better myself. Street goons and idiots and spandex only get you so far. So a vigilante. Stain was no longer running and drew his katana, resting it against his shoulder. You think this is going to be easy? It wouldn't be training if it was. Ronin sheathed his sword and gave a short bow, never taking his eyes off his opponent, then threw more needles. I might need to get some of these, Stain remarked as he dodged and deflected them, then threw his own knife and watched it bounce off his smaller opponent, barely bothering him and not worth wasting the energy to try and dodge. Ronin kept using the needles, trying to perfect his aim, but he could never seem to make his hits land. Stain was too fast and adjusted too quickly. What couldn't be dodged was swatted to the side by his sword. Stain advanced on Ronin, preferring melee to ranged combat. He only had so many knives after all, and no matter how accurate they weren't doing anything. Ronin advanced as well, finally drawing his sword and slipping through the portal. There was a moment of confusion from Stain, but he heard the whistling sound as the sword cut through the air and managed to jump out of the way again. His opponent had teleported, a very strong quirk, but not one seen in melees much. Shouldn't you use a gun with your quirk? I'm trying to save people, not kill them. Ronin now took his old stance, roof guard, and prepared himself. Quote. Not bad. Stain charged, meeting his sword and pushing down. The gauntlets helped him not be crushed, right until Stain stepped on his foot and drove his pommel into Ronin's helm, rocking his world a bit. But you rely on your quirk too much. Ha. Ronin tried to kick him off, but Stain was too close to Ronin's leg and was only hit by the knee, which he cut anyway to further dampen the blow. He jumped backward while holding the leg with one hand, pulling Ronin forward and off balance. You don't seem to know that much about real martial arts. A side kick. Here. Against me. He tugged Ronin's leg forward and let go, Ronin's own weight forcing him forward and into Stain's side kick. It struck him across the ribs, forcing him to roll across the rooftop. You seem to rely on your quirk to surprise and overpower opponents, but against opponents who are ready for it. Ronin rose and prepared to clash swords again, only to swing at nothing and throw himself off balance as Stain chose to evade rather than compete in strength twice. Ronin was going to activate the sword and teleport through Stain's sword, hitting the man, but the initial clash never connected. Stain opted to sidestep, dropping his sword and grabbing Ronin, much like how Ronin grabbed many a criminal in his day. Stain's back hit Ronin as he got into position, then kicked his legs out as he flipped the younger vigilante over his shoulder by both of Ronin's arms. Ronin dropped his sword and lost his breath as he hit the rooftop. You have a few basics, but overall, you're not good enough to be threatening. Ronin was tempted to go for the sword, but that'd be predictable. Instead, he took out one of his guns, Kindness, and shot 3 times at the murderer. The first one forced Stain back, the second caught him barely, and the third missed entirely. Quote. At least you have options. Stain threw one of Ronin's own needles and hit him in the finger, one of his only uncovered spots. Didn't break bone, but it did pierce and it hurt like a bitch, making him drop his gun. You lack the experience or technique to beat me. Try to stop using your quirk so much to ambush and learn some martial arts. If you could win in a straight fight, you'd be even better at ambushing. ... Isn't this usually my lecture? Ronin moved his fingers, then rocketed forward. Stain dodged a wild kick, but the kick wasn't the point. Ronin grabbed the sword and sheath he dropped when thrown, then teleported away to wrap his finger. They didn't look away from each other as Ronin bandaged his finger. You're pretty good at martial arts. Where'd you learn your swordplay? Ronin finished applying the basic bandage, moving his hand again while Stain spoke. Experience. Repetition. In this industry, you get good or you get caught. Ronin sheathed his sword, adjusting his grip. The sword had been left on while on the floor, and he might be able to pull off the slash dimension. Ronin tried to eyeball if Stain was in the sword smoke or not as Stain picked up the needle that hit Ronin's finger, then licked it. ... Wah! Suddenly, Ronin slumped as he lost all movement. He was just a sitting duck before the villain. Stain didn't even give him a second look. Now that you know you can't win, you should leave. You're worth sparing, but don't get in my way when I'm hunting fakes. Stain gathered up his knives and the needles Ronin had thrown, then left. Just left. Ronin was stuck where he had been paralyzed, a sort of leaning forward while collapsed. The whole fight had barely been 1 minute if you counted the stare down and rush. He couldn't move anything below his head. Even his neck was stuck. At least he could breathe and blink. ... Is this how Maruko feels every time we fight? Under a minute of fighting for all the work he'd done, and Stain just left. It was unsatisfying, annoying, even degrading. He'd lost, but Stain just leaving felt like a kick while he was down. Stain even talked shit about his martial arts, but he couldn't counter anything because Stain was so much better than him at it. Thinking it over, when was the last time he actually learned a martial art? When he learned how to use a knife, because he hurt his shoulder and that was just learning how to fight. He didn't know any actual techniques. The last time. The spear moves well, the quarterstaff moves. He had been so focused on replacing his old kit, he didn't even think to finish his initial kit. He never made that spear he wanted. Ronin was stuck staring at the ground as he tried to think over his mistakes. He should have stopped throwing the needles when it was clear they weren't doing anything. They applied pressure, but Ronin couldn't do anything with that pressure. He didn't have the accuracy to threaten Stain at a range, even with the wide-ranged guns. Stain's parkour was better too. He used it anywhere, not just to move around but as a fighting technique. Ronin did too, but he looked like he was stumbling while Stain flew. He thought he was fast in the sewers, but he wasn't shit. The only reason he caught up to Stain was Stain wanted to fight him, probably away from the heroes. They had been close to the public, and they might have been interrupted by heroes if they fought right there. At least he wasn't going to get caught for a while. He thought he'd spend most of the night here and had slept at home, but he couldn't even last that long. Stain had total control of the situation from start to fight, from when they engaged to when they ended. Location, duration, all of it was because Stain wanted it to happen that way. Ronin couldn't get that kind of swordplay in a week or a month. Probably not even a year. It wasn't just their clash, where Stain had demonstrated superior knowledge of his weapon and switched from a direct confrontation to a pommel bash. Deflecting his needles took excellent control. Even with no techniques, Stain had honed his handling to a point. Slowly, he could feel his body beginning to respond to his commands. He pushed himself up, leaning on his arms as he crawled to his knees. Stain was nowhere in sight, it was dark, and his whole body hurt. He'd learn from his mistakes, improve next time. Ronin wasn't that bad off. His chest hurt from so many things, the needles, the kick, being thrown into the rooftop, but the rest of him was fine. He took a minute to think over everything, pulling out his notebook to take notes. A drawing cut, good for starting combat or getting the sword out when ambushed. An overhead cut, the easiest to learn. A flicking cut that lacked power but had a good range. An upward cut, that paired well with the overhead by getting the sword in place for it. A sideways cut that could get the most power if done correctly, but the more power you put into it the less you can use your sword to defend yourself. Some of the first things he ever wrote down when creating Ronin. Midoriya stared down at them, amazed at himself. He still didn't know how to do 2 of them, and this was written half a year ago. The fuck had he been doing? Fucking around with quirks when he was trying to prove you didn't need them to be a hero, that's what. Midoriya pulled himself off the rooftop and put Yamato and its sheath back on his hip. He needed to go home and rethink some things. Someone put in a miscellaneous report about Stain, saying he was going after Ingenium. But with the UA festival in a little over 12 hours, no one really paid attention to it. Just like how no one paid attention to the strange figure, sitting on the back section of the train, debating with himself. Chapter end notes. Betcha didn't think we were gonna have a power abuse arc in an existential crisis this early in the series, did ya? For me, Ronin and Stain are the real rivals. 2 vigilantes with identical methods, mostly martial arts with a small amount of quirk for support but opposing purposes. Mao is more destructive, Maruko is more dangerous, but Stain is the only one who can outdo Ronin at his own game. He kept up with people who had super speed, surpassed people with super strength, and lectured them all. Stain even lectures his opponents as he beats them. Stain was a major inspiration for Ronin, from their hit-and-run-see sort of fighting styles where they never stop moving, their acrobatic fights, and their martial arts versus quirks approach. Overhaul might be against quirks as a whole, but Stain is a better example of fighting without quirks. Stain doesn't need his quirk to kill you, Overhaul isn't shown to have any talents outside of his quirk. The fight was anticlimactic, and at risk of sounding artsy, that's kind of the point. There was no fight. Like Ronin just fucks with people, Stain spent the entire time just fucking with Ronin. Lecturing him, outmaneuvering him, learning about him, all the things Ronin usually does. I don't really care if people enjoy my work or not because I do this for me, greedy bastard I am, but I'm trying some new things out. The fight was more in-depth than the last ones, partially as a reference to Ronin's old way of fighting. In-depth, high detail, and precise. Not flashy, but efficient. I hope I'm improving. Boy, this chapter wasn't happy. Wasn't depressing, but I like to keep my notes pretty Gucci, and I hope no one hated the build-up versus the letdown. If you did, you just experienced what my parents did when I was born. Chapter 48. Chapter 48. Chapter summary. Ronin wanted to learn from Stain, and oh boy did he learn. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya didn't head home at first, but decided to go somewhere else. The homeless district of Musudafu had an air of melancholy that suited his current funk. People were huddled together, sleeping in bags or boxes and covered with cardboard or blankets. He recognized it. This was the street that Ronin had been born on, 7 months ago. He hadn't been named that, but the spirit was his. He could still see the 5 kids. The old man hadn't even moved and stayed sleeping there to the day. Ronin adjusted the man's blanket for him. The night was cool, and he didn't want anyone getting sick. Moving along the dark streets, a few of the lamps flickered. This state of disrepair was uncalled for, even if it did make his job easier. Midoriya could feel the cold breeze on his fingers, on the single cut, and it stung almost as much as his own needle. Hypothetically, all he needed was metal gloves. This would block off his entire body, and Stain couldn't cut him, rendering his quirk useless and giving Midoriya an advantage. But being hit by such a situation, quirk was just part of the problem. Stain hadn't just beaten him, he had beaten himself. Those needles, his own lack of training. He had learned the basics but given up after that, content with what he had and no improvement. He looked up at the old office. Bits of dried blood from his second fight still adorned the floors and walls. It seemed no police ever bothered to even try investigating what happened here. The door wasn't locked anymore, and Ronin went inside. He could find the burn marks from his first furnace, the holes he drilled to install his vise and small anvil, the flakes of metal from his forging. He slowly drew out the last thing forged here, 3 sticks. The quarterstaff he never used, that was supposed to become a spear someday. How many times had he actually tried to use it in a fight? 3, if even. Midoriya pulled out his notes, looking over his ideas. The plans he'd made, slowly straying from martial arts to vigilantism, then on to quirks. None were bad, they all helped him, but you couldn't have 3 foundations. Ronin and Midoriya read and reread the pages over and over. They had an important decision to make. There was an easy way to beat Stain, get Maruko to chase him all the way there. She'd definitely probably beat Stain. With his teleportation, he just needed to evade her all the way to Hosu and together they'd beat Stain down. Or he could train. Thousands of reps, hours of research, breaking and rebuilding his body into a war machine to trump Stain's. One took a weekend and some batteries. The other could take years. How many would die in that time? Stain had 16 kills to his name, and over 20 injured heroes forced into retirement. How long would the solution take effect? Midoriya couldn't drag Maruko to every fight, but his body and techniques. Ronin called for the most people to be saved, but Midoriya was trying to look ahead. How many people could he save if he stopped relying on others? Stopped relying on all for one, stopped waiting to take opportunities from Nezu, and just dove in on his own. They looked down at the pages, jacket sent adrift in the wind. It stared through the pages, slowly drawing a pencil. If he was going to become a machine, he'd need to do it right, and that called for research. The Ronin made one of his trademark disappearances, one day before the UA Sports Festival kicked off. Nobody cared though or thought much of it, other than an overzealous fanboy mammal, and those who did were glad to have one less thing to worry about. In video games, there was a weapon circle. Certain weapons countered each other. Tower shields, massive planks that could protect most of the body, countered arrows. Small nimble weapons like dirks could flit over the heavier and slower shields, countering them. To finish this small example of a trifecta, an armed bow would kill a dirk 100 yards before the dirk could do anything, countering it. The sword had its own circle. It paired well with and against shields because maneuverability was something swordsmen were trained in. It was countered by the spear, a weapon that had even better maneuverability at a slight distance and could force its opponent's back. Spears were countered by axes, which could break a spear's shaft, which were countered by swords, which couldn't be chopped in half and could outmaneuver the axe. This chose Midoriya's next weapon and training for him. While he milled over a design, the reps started. He didn't even need to move his legs, just thrust. The lead arm guided the end of the staff, the back arm supplied the power. Midoriya never even finished his spear training because he hurt his shoulder and never went back to it. Now he slammed his staff into the trees over and over, trying to constantly make it faster, move off course less, and hit harder. When he broke off, he wrote down every idea he could think of. These would be sorted through later, combined, and burned until the best idea he had come up with was the last one standing. He'd finish his meditative breathing and writings, then return to drills. He danced his feet in a new stance, a more bladed stance. The back leg would go almost straight while his front leaned forward, pushing his upper body over his knee. His back foot pointed to the side while his front pointed at the opponent. His arms jutted forward, balancing out the outstretched legs to get as much drive behind itself without falling over. Midoriya stepped back, then entered his stance. The lead leg came forward like a lunge. The front arm extended till it was straight, parallel with the ground, and the back rose to his pectoral. His back foot dug into the ground as he struck the tree once, twice, a dozen times. He had to stop after that. It seemed, at the time, a dozen thrusts was his limit. He stepped back to analyze the benefits of the spear as he tried to think of a new way of making a spearhead. Maybe thinking about what it had to do would help him think of new designs. The reach of the spear was the first strength. It was good for one thing, making it easy to refine. Almost everything the spear did was in some way, shape, or form a stab. That meant practice for one attack carried over to the rest. It was similar but even more simple than the sword slash. Quick and easy to inflict damage with. Now, he practiced for the fight he could easily imagine. He'd practice later on live people, but for now, he had to stick with what he had. He'd have 10 feet of range to cover, but it could be done. He already knew how, and it involved the rework that he needed to do. Midoriya broke off at noon for the simplest way to create his new spear. He could get a better design later, but for now, he knew of something that would suffice. He could craft it with the supplies he had left from his recent projects, and it should be finished in time for a patrol. He might not patrol every night for a bit, and even when he did, it wouldn't be for as long. Right now, he intended to craft some spearheads. Midoriya sat alone in Ishiyama High School. Most people who did this had automatic hammers and grinders, but he just had brute force. Still, the final piece was being finished. It didn't glint, it wasn't pretty, but as he watched the chemical bath, he could feel satisfied with his work. It was the only thing he had always done himself the entire most of the way. His helmet definitely had very little to do with his own crafting skill. But this wasn't some mask made by the best school in the world or a sword formed from the bodies of giant monsters sealed with magic powers. The spade shape was formed from a piece of steel that he had found on the side of the road. It wasn't even high carbon steel. He checked the connection with each of the other sticks to make sure there weren't any problems. Then, he pulled out an old piece of leather, cut from the wind itself. There were no gauntlets, no fancy bodysuit this time. The sword was only there as a backup plan. The black dome attached to his head, and he gave one last glance at the new jacket and bodysuit. That jacket had only been used once, where it performed flawlessly. Too flawlessly. He might use it again someday, but he needed to learn, and he wasn't going to improve with a crutch like the possessed items. He needed to perfect his skills with each of the weapons with no special tricks before he could move on. Ronin entered the sewers, then sheathed his sword. It was time to start training, starting with running a few kilos. Nezu had a great day overall. The first tier competition went well, even if the ending was somewhat predictable. Kaminari self-destructing, Uraraka unable to reach her goal, Yaoyorozu stalling in the last minute, Monoma losing in the first round, and Bakugo winning overall. A few twists, like that Shinso kid being the one to beat Monoma who didn't know when to not respond. There was no doubt Shinso would have given Bakugo a challenge in self-restraint if nothing else. But now tomorrow would be the time for the second years, then it was time for he could only consider it the time to see what All Might's heir had learned. Mirio should be an interesting sight to behold. Nezu's Ronin radar, triggered, but it was much slower than usual. A villain, using Ronin's pathway. A sewage worker. The camera instead showed a blurry figure jogging down the sewers, not flying with his usual pace. His speed was constant, and he navigated the sewers easily before exiting out of an alleyway. Quote. What is he doing? The gangsters were in the middle of something when the footprints rang out across the alleyway. Two of the four goons adjusted to stop the newcomer, a small figure wearing a jacket, holding a strange pipe-looking thing. It was about 5.5 feet long and he was rummaging in his jacket for something. You need some directions, bud. Turn around and go back to whatever shit you just walked out of, for your sake. The figure pulled out the fourth piece and added it, adjusting it to about 7 feet long before flipping the new end towards them. Quote. Come, I need the practice. He dug his feet in and held up the new spade-like piece. It started out with a traditional spade shape for a spear, before branching out into a crossguard still at the head of the spear. The other three segments seemed ordinary enough. Quote. What fucking air you think this is? One of them tried to swat it out of the air. The man's body didn't move, but his arms rocked the spear back out of reach. It then burst forward, striking the man in the arm. It was a good clean stab. He screamed, and the other two men looked over. One packed up the goods and left, while the other swore and went for his knife. The first two men stepped back, then both simultaneously charged, giving the man 2 targets. The spear drew back, cocking like a gun ready to blow. Quote. Serene style, second form, the tide and waves. His spear rocked back a little further before he took a slight step forward and slammed his spear into the second man, stopping all forward momentum before jumping far backward. The first man still charged, right into the second wave. Ronin jumped far enough back that he could step forward slightly and the sides could crash, the rolling waves meeting the unflinching shore. The second man was stopped dead, rising slightly off the ground and forcing the mysterious man backward. The third man charged with his knife, not realizing that his two compatriots might be in serious danger from being impaled. He stepped forward, still out of the range of the tide and waves. Serene style, first form, red rain. He stepped forward slightly, already performing light jab after light jab with the spear. He could only muster 9 back-to-back, and only 7 managed to hit, but 3 would have sufficed. The light cuts pierced the third man's body as the two advanced at each other, each thrust more compact and quick than the last before he entirely gave out on the 9th. Midoriya overviewed his work. The police and an ambulance were on their way, but the last person got away. He ditched the phone and separated his spear, leaping after the escaping criminal. Across the city, filled with hundreds of heroes, reports came out about the second most wanted criminal in Musudafu. He was downtown and leaping across buildings, and wanted for quite a lot. Whatever hero caught him might get a big bonus in the future. It was pretty difficult to keep his momentum when the heroes started showing up, but he wanted to make sure the criminal got caught. Served him right for operating during the daytime. Wouldn't have this problem if he did it at night. Still, not that many heroes could chase him, or realize they could. Many people stayed below to deal with civilians who could help stop him. He said help because the current batch couldn't. No sign of the heroes who'd pose a threat like Kamui Woods, so he just ran along unmolested by the heroes. Most people didn't have movement quirks or weren't familiar with fighting across buildings and wouldn't follow him as he jumped from building to building. He kept an eye on his target, smiling as he turned himself in. For a simple drug deal, this was way too much. It seemed neither one would ever make it out of this, especially when the laughter started. Hands off nobodies, he's mine. Maruko was still here in town, and she could actually follow him. She chased him across the buildings, laughing as she got closer and closer. Do you enjoy our last team up that much, Maruko? The fuck? You're trying to throw off my rhythm and make me fuck up. She snarled as she leapt again. It won't happen, and that was not a team up. We were just in the same place at the same time. Doing the same thing together, also known as teaming up. He shifted course, giving her an over-the-shoulder look. Have you learned any martial arts yet? Shut the fuck you. She was actually howling with rage as she attempted to crash into him. Her plan relied on constant velocity, guessing where he was going to go, and her own speed. When she guessed where he was going to go, stopping or facing her was not in the plan. He spread his arms out and caught her mid-tackle in a big hug, taking a few steps back from the impact and bracing his feet against the ledge of the building. Quote. Huh. Then threw her over the edge of the building sideways so she couldn't land properly. The other heroes stopped to watch her fall, or make room for her, some trying to catch her. You. Fucker. It wasn't lethal or all that painful, but the chasing heroes stopped to make sure she was alright and gave him a few more seconds to keep running. The heroes didn't seem to notice the decrease in people, or the increases in homelessness and abandoned buildings as they entered the streets Ronin had been running. Maruko should have tried to grab him instead of swearing when he threw her. That had definitely not been a great move on his part, but at the end of the day it did work, so it was at least a good move. Midoriya's endurance ensured that the heroes who weren't mobile had been ditched back in the downtown. Now, it was time to lose the more mobile ones in his own home turf. The police were there now and giving some orders, but they didn't matter. Ronin had been taking a mostly sensible route, albeit hadn't used his teleportation once. Maruko was back on his trail, swearing with every jump. Not even death itself is gonna know what the fuck I did to you, Ronin, you motherfucking sentient shit stain. She was pretty creative with her insults. If only her attacks were as creative. Midoriya ran toward his favorite factory, the one he'd been to twice before. It didn't look like he'd jump for it because the distance was physically too much. The roof was 15 feet away, and why would he leap down to the other heroes? Midoriya turned and stopped right as Maruko jumped, locking her into the air with no chance to change her direction. She should have ran the last 12 meters to him, she'd have more control that way. Midoriya long jumped, grabbing the window with both hands. He immediately pulled himself up and over the same window he used last time he had to come this way, then fell off the other side and landed on the railing with both feet, purposely falling forward and rolling out of it before springing back up. He went straight to the sewer entrance he researched, jumping in without a second thought and bolting. They had the building surrounded, but Nezu knew that Ronin had left. Or the Ronin look-alike had. This Ronin had not teleported once as the original Ronin never did. It was all free running and terrain knowledge. He would sharply turn 90 degrees by grabbing a pipe or something whenever Maruko or some other hero was just about to cut him off multiple times. Now, he ran through the sewers. Not a teleport in sight. This seemed to be his base level, without his energy quirk. It didn't seem fast until you realized he kept this pace up for 10 minutes straight. Even Maruko seemed to be getting tired since she kept missing her tackles. Nobody had infinite energy unless. Was Ronin testing his quirk to increase his endurance? He hadn't slowed down yet, and he hadn't been moving away into hiding but back to the city. Ronin once again left Nezu's field of detectors, and he vowed to blow more money to find out where he was coming and going from. Midoriya replaced his notes. He shouldn't neglect his parkour anymore, and that long jump at the end had been a great time to test his skills. Grabbing things was easy for him, his hands were used to carrying his weapons for hours. Wasn't exactly 1-to-1, but it carried over well enough. Midoriya looked over his uniform again, eyeing the new piece of metal in the coat's tail. It looked like the old leather would get a little more wear and tear. He closed everything up, leaving and checking his phone. Sure enough, Hero News showed that Stain had attacked Ingenium. At least there had been a couple of sidekicks to force him to retreat, brought by a miscellaneous report. He'd survive at least, but his harrowing ability from now on was questionable. Ronin had done his part. Midoriya nodded to himself, then moved on. He had more spear moves to research, and a few parkour tricks to learn. Maybe a few more items to make. He always wanted to try fighting with a chain. Scorpius from Mortal Kombat, the 100th Mortal Kombat game, made it seem pretty cool. And when he was running away, he really wished he had some caltrops or something, and they didn't seem that hard to build. Chapter end notes. To start with, the ending joke about Mortal Kombat is because C is the Roman numeral for 100. That might have been confusing, I had to Google what Roman numeral 100 was so I wouldn't have gotten it if I was reading. Finally, 2 chapters in a day. Ish, it's kinda late by me. Not sure it counts at this time of the night. Midoriya is going for the very big flips. By only bringing Yamato but only using it for escape, he's forcing himself to rely only on the weapon he brings, in this case, the spear. Spear isn't named. Fun fact, both of the guns are now named, the second one has just never been used. Submit names if you want, don't, I dunno. The spear has been hinted at many a time. It was the de facto unfinished weapon, and now Midoriya has begun to use and learn it. Not Ronin, not yet. Midoriya has some thinking to do before he knows who Ronin really is. We get to have detailed attack descriptions again in some pseudo-tutorials. The first time the spear showed up has some explanation of how to use one, but if people want I can put the entire process in the next chapter. There are going to be more explanations about spear fighting anyway, so I can put in the initial stuff again. A new style. Most of the other styles are based on the weapon associated with them, but serene is the yin to violence is yang. People using the violence philosophy talk with italics, and are generally more forceful and angry if you want to associate a sound with it. People using the serene philosophy talk with bold, and are usually going to be a bit more reserved and calm. I try to change it up in the word choice, not sure it's noticeable. This all experimental, any reaction is good, and I'ma keep testing the waters. We're no longer advancing toward finishing Ronin's arsenal, but cementing who Ronin is and what he stands for, one step at a time. Also, fast facts, Ronin and Maruko have ended their fights the same way every single time. Ronin has landed the last insult and ran away like a little bitch, with Maruko just 1 or 2 moves from winning. Can't wait to see someone end the stalemate. Chapter 49. Chapter 49. Chapter summary. Ronin is absent, Midoriya is training again, and Ingenium is slightly better off than in canon. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Another round of drills. He stepped in and twisted his spear to turn his shoulder, putting more power into the thrust. Again. He backed out, then stepped in again and drilling the tree with 11 strikes before he couldn't keep pace. Another set. He switched between long strikes and short strikes, forcing himself back and forward to replicate the Titan waves and Red Ron over and over. His shoulders ached, but his strikes improved. Still wasn't good enough. Quote. He would have dodged that. The problem was he needed to get into a rhythm, and Stain would dodge every one of them. Quote. I need more. He closed his eyes and rolled his shoulders, forcing his body to relax. Strained muscles would just hold him back. Regrets would just hold him back. Thinking would just hold him back. He gazed over the spear, focusing on it. For now, this was his world. 7 feet of wood and metal, ending in a small cross. The target didn't matter. His whole body gently rocked before the attack. It gave away what he was going to do, but right now it didn't matter how obvious what he was going to do. Spear stabbed. It's what they did. He had a spear. He was going to stab. His body only rocked a few centimeters back and forth, always staying in his zone of balance to avoid falling over. He jetted forward won the first strike, spinning the spear but not moving his feet from their place as his body crossed over his lead leg. It cut through the air, moving the full meter in barely a quarter of a second. Then the tide receded, and the spear returned. His body rocked backward as he withdrew the spear, avoiding the counterattack and keeping his spear from being knocked away. Another crashing wave, and so another thrust. His spear dove forward again. The spin put on it minuscule, the power immense. His back leg tightened as if bracing against the impact that would have been there, his back foot pushing off the ground as if trying to jump straight into the stab. But then it receded again. The front toes pushed off the ground and made him rock back, the spear unwinding to its initial position. The third strike came, his body leaning in. The feet stayed in the same position, but the legs pushed forward off their bases. The upper body leaned at the hip, driving his weight down the shaft. It wasn't a freestyle of free small cuts, but a series of momentum-shattering blows. If mindless violence was a never-ending attack from side to side, the Titan waves was a never-ending attack forward and backward. The fourth came, then the fifth ever faster. 6, 7, then 8. Every strike was a little faster as the rocking speed increased. The 9th and 10th seemed simultaneous but were surpassed by the 11th. The 12th struck even faster still, almost a tenth of a second now. The improvements were minor but could be devastating. Finally, just as he was about to give up, his front leg rose. He lunged into the final strike, pushing off with his back leg and driving his whole body into the thrust. His entire body was pointing forward, seeming one piece with his spear. It struck the tree, embedding itself halfway to the crossguard in the wood. His entire body was still. He could feel it though. It was Tuesday, and the sun was setting. He must have thrown that jab hundreds of thousands of times today. His hands had been wrapped, but they still might have developed blisters. There had been no patrol today, no lunch either. Just the crash of a spearman's wave against the shore of his own limits, wearing it down until he finally did it. He hit a tenth of a second. Midoriya didn't make the mistake of using superglue twice. It seemed a little risky as a long-term fake beard attacher, and he learned of better ways to do it back when he was making the jacket by stealing ideas from cosplayers from 150 years ago. A little spirit gum would have done better, but he found a 2-for-1 for eyelash adhesive. Got some for mom, now nobody would question why he bought it. Used to glue the hair snips to his face. He had to don most of the costume for this but didn't bring the sword since it hadn't been raining. Besides, he was supposed to be training the spear, not the sword. The wind stirred up his cloak as he walked. Made him feel like he was in a samurai flick with his costume. It was dark, and his legs and arms hadn't been this kind of sore in too long. He had never realized how much he missed it. A weird feeling, since he tried to avoid pain as much as possible. He entered the bar with his usual reserved air, smiling at the young men, who were all older than him. He got his usual seat and thumbed through the menu, reading everything over to see if anything caught his eye. The meat platter from last time was a little expensive, so he couldn't always get it, but for calories per yen, it was very nice. He had dropped the leftovers off before running to the subway. Midoriya didn't buy any water, since he didn't want to use the money on something he could get at home. He had gone through 6 water bottles today and didn't need more water. He was trying to decide between a sandwich and a burger when someone sat down 2 seats over and huffed. Yeah, 1 glass, beer, you know what I mean. He didn't need to look to know who she was. He tried to shrink away as subtly as possible while ordering his sandwich, pulled pork with barbecue sauce. It was his go-to food for the place. Quote. That you, old man. Maruko seemed to be peering at him. Now seemed more appropriate to take in what she looked like. With messy hair, the slight dark line under the eyes, she appeared to be suffering from minor sleeplessness. She wore casual clothes instead of her hero outfit, a t-shirt and jeans. He was pretty sure they were the same as last time. Quote. How old do you think I am? He chided her gently, chuckling to himself. She squinted, trying to take a guess. Quote. Fort UHM, 35 She was putting a lot more effort into this than he thought anyone would bother to. Quote. 40, and even 40. He chuckled, making her embarrassed. You flatter me, Ms. Maruko. You might want to order some food if you came to eat. Whoa, yeah, shit. She buried herself in the menu. Quote. What did I get last time? I try not to pry into what other people get, but I believe you got the roast beef, potatoes, and carrots. Maruko nodded, pointing at Midoriya. Yeah, I'll get what he said. They sat in silence for about 10 seconds before she started talking again. My name isn't Maruko, old man. I'm off duty right now. Call me Usagiyama. That's a bit of a mouthful, but I'll do my best, Ms. Usagiyama. He gave her his best smile, then rubbed his stiffening shoulders. Should he visit a masseur? He'd feel a little uncomfortable with a masseuse. Male versus female massager. What's with the Ms. Shit? And what's with your shoulders? You lift one too many grandkids. She seemed very inquisitive for some reason. It's just manners, Ms. Usagiyama, and I am single. No adopted kids, not even a pet to my name. Where the hell was his food to save him from this awkward conversation? Ooh, single. At your age. She was looking smug now. But then her eyes drifted to his arms, and the gauntlets on them. Quote. Do you do martial arts? Which one? Where was this going? With his outfit, the gauntlets, and boots, it was pretty obvious he did. Quote. Just wondering if that's how you hurt your arm, old man. His sandwich finally arrived like an angel from heaven, saving him from this conversation. Her food arrived a little later, but she kept playing with her food. Quote. Are you good at martial arts? Which one? She thought over it, then rephrased her question. Are you good at fighting? At fighting some people. He took a bite, chewing as he thought. It had barely been 3 days since he would have answered yes. Even if he couldn't win, he didn't think he'd lose. How much had Stain really shaken him up? Quote. I once thought I could never lose. I think now that defeating that misconception might be the greatest victory I've ever had. What does that even mean? She tried to figure out his vague words. They were true, but he made them intentionally vague so she'd stop asking questions and think it over. He got to eat in peace, enjoying the quiet atmosphere as Maruko no, as Usagiyama thought over his words, trying to figure out what they meant. He paid for his meal with cash and left the heroine to stew in her own confusion. It was a quiet night, and he greeted the homeless people with a smile on his face. Sir, could you please help? He turned to the homeless man, GI, and gave him his full attention. There's a fight about 2 blocks that way, but there isn't any way of telling the heroes. Please, if you could call them for us, we'd be grateful. A few other homeless people nodded. They seemed to follow him, probably to get out of the fight. If he listened, he could make it out. Over 10 people. Midoriya checked the time, then sighed. Quote. I will take care of it, Mr. GI. Don't you worry about a thing. He moved in the direction of the fight, smiling. He wanted to try something, and this was as fine a chance to try it out as ever. There were 20 people, all swearing and arguing while hitting each other. Then, the 25th person and the last one to arrive whistled to get all of their attention. Ladies, gentlemen, I don't suppose I can ask you all to resolve this peacefully. He wasn't a large figure, but he carried himself like a larger man. His cloak blew in the wind, and some laughed. Some spit, some swore, but some decided to beat up this lost old man. Quote. I thought so. He took his spear posture, hands at waist level. He cleared his head, then refocused. I tried to resolve this peaceably. Everything that's about to happen was done as self-defense. A sentence like that alone was suspicious. His presence tripled any suspiciousness. An old man dressed like a Japanese warrior from 500 years ago, in a strange fighting pose. But they did not listen. The first 2 got into range, unarmored and unarmed. He stepped forward like he was armed with his own spear, bringing his back arm up to his pectoral while his lead arm struck like the spear itself, striking the man in the stomach. The first attacker's own momentum crushed him, knocking the wind out of him. But as the second attacker moved to hit this strange old man, the tide retreated, then resurged. It came back as fast as a whip, striking the man with the flat of his hand to the temple. The second man went down like a sack of rocks. Midoriya straightened himself, moving his fingers. They were more alert to him now, and one of the charging men stopped. 3 more went on though, straight into Midoriya's waiting clutches. He rocked forward, staying stretched out as he jabbed his hand into the leading man's nose. The second was only a moment behind, but he got in 2 more quick jabs in that time, stunning the leading man with his repeated strike the nose. Looked broken now. Midoriya pushed off on the final hit, rocking backward and taking a single step backward, giving the now off-balance second man who had lunged at where he had been, a spinning back kick to the side of the head as compensation. Another man went down. The first man was stepped towards and received another barrage of jabs as he almost finished refocusing. Every single hit was straight to the face until he thought to block, covering his own vision. Then the hits backed off, pausing for a second. Just as the first man peeked over his own hands, a power thrust struck him in the face. Midoriya's fist spun as it flew, putting his shoulder into the blow, and his entire body put into the punch. He went down as well, just in time for the first armed one. He had a pipe and swung it like a baseball bat at the old man. The old man, in question, retracted his arm and body so it missed, then pressed into the range, smothering the pipe by being too close for it to be properly swung. This was done to give Midoriya another chance for a power swing at the man's body since this guy seemed to have a toaster for a head, and those didn't take too well to being punched. The hit drove into and through the man's body, but the hit wasn't done. Until now, he'd just been using his left arm. His right arm, the power arm, just rose from his waist to his pectoral. Now, it was the right arm's turn. His upper body turned as his left held onto the man, fixing him in place for the overhand right. It connected like a hook more than a straight punch but still sent the man flying. Midoriya wasn't even using the gloves, he couldn't. He left the belt and wires that made them work at school. He hadn't even taken off his strange hat yet, or his stupid-looking cloak. Now, as 4 more men charged him for some reason instead of running away, he ditched the cloak, throwing it at the first of them and sidestepping the rushing figure. He stepped to his own left while sticking out his right leg and arm. The man couldn't stop and was caught on his leg, tripping straight into Midoriya's waiting arms. He was spun around to build momentum before being launched at 2 of the charging men. He had some trouble when he threw midnight, but he thought he was getting better. Now though, Midoriya faced the next person. They tried to stab him, thrusting with their knife. Midoriya stabbed with an open hand to counter, pointing his fingers like a knife. Both didn't hit the other's body, but then Midoriya grabbed the man's arm and stepped forward, striking him once in the stomach with his power hand. He forced both their arms away from their bodies and the man's head under his armpit, putting him in a position to knee the man in the stomach over and over. The man struggled with his right, which was forced back until he couldn't get the momentum to break out. Finally, with his free left, he grabbed Midoriya's leg. Now, Midoriya didn't technically need it to balance since he was leaning on the other man, but he kind of liked having it, so he raised his other leg, shifting their center of gravity and tipping them both off balance. They fell backward and the man's head struck the ground, making him go limp. Midoriya's hat fell off, letting the hair he glued and cut himself be ruffled up in the breeze. He wore a tank top for training and loose, silky pants that didn't hamper his movements and covered the boots. His arms were decorated with sports tape in the large gauntlets, but the skin that could be seen was a mix of burns and scars from both middle school and his vigilantism. He was quite an imposing figure. Before, he seemed to carry himself well. Now, despite being one of the smallest people there including the women, his presence alone dwarfed every one of them. Quote. I believe we are done here, and we shall be parting ways. Please, take care of yourselves. Despite saying they'd be parting ways, he didn't move. Instead, the gang members had to come and pick up each of their own members, dragging them away. He watched, making sure they left in different directions before rolling his shoulders. His left one hurt especially, some of those jabs didn't land right. He could tell. Quote. From carrying one grandkid too many. Ah, such lovely fantasies. Maruko squatted behind some trash cans as she watched the old man pick up his things. Now that was some martial arts she could get behind. All Ronin ever did with his was run away, the old man beat 2 gangs with it. Ronin made it look pretty wimpy, but what was his name again? Whatever it was, he made it look interesting. She didn't really have any ways to get a hold of him. Other than going up to him and asking, but that didn't occur to her. She'd just have to camp out that bar and ask him the next time he came. Midoriya undid his makeup much easier. He put the scar on by marking where it should go with his freckles. He blinked at the light adjustment, then finished putting his things away. Tonight had been pretty good. He needed to keep drilling his spear tomorrow, but it was all good since it applied to so much. He had no worries about that at least. His jab and spear thrusts also carried over well, so more reason to practice. He went home feeling content, despite his aching shoulders. The dark streets were a second home to him, and the first home to Ronin. It felt good to practice again, with only minor fights to cement what he learned instead of trying to learn in the middle of fights. He finished his stretches and meditation, slipping off into a happy sleep. He wasn't that worried about the next day, since he'd be going to learn more parkour. The morning he'd spend researching more techniques, the afternoon he'd do them. It was a fun plan. For Midoriya, Wednesday was spent fine-tuning his movements. The lunges he did, the flexibility he had, the directions he could move in, all had to be honed for the rematch. There were other criminals to fight to be sure, but right now, all that mattered to him was the one who beat him. He lost fights before, but he never lost to people. Until Stain. Stain was imprinted in his mind, a beacon he could aim himself at. He could remember how fluidly he moved, and his own passion that once burned for heroism compelled him onward. Would he try to be a hero still? Maybe someday, but for today, being the best he could be would suffice. He entered another round of jumps, trying to get that quick direction switch Stain had done while fighting. Nezu looked over the internship requests for the first years. There were quite a few gaps between some students. There were a few surprises, but most of them fell into a reasonable order. Bakugo had the most, barely more than Todoroki, but they were in the thousands. Most people were in the hundreds if they were lucky. The third years got more attention, but most of them were already in an internship. Mirio had flashed his stuff quite well. The problem was, it was a little too well. He had no aces in the hole, hidden cards up his sleeves, or tricks. Everyone in the world knew Mirio's power now, including the super strength that was supposedly a mutation. The person Mirio was getting compared to was, of course, Ronin. He'd been much less active, possibly preparing for the item he wanted UA to help him create. No specific time of day mentioned, but probably after lunch. Mirio's quirk was a fine addition to One for All. Most people could never beat it, but for Ronin, it was still a battle of one hit. If he got the drop on Mirio, all it would take was one hit. It was a two-way street, but Ronin seemed to be much faster, skilled, and above all, smarter. It was hard to hit someone who knew every play you'd make. The Monday incident felt like showing off. Over 1,000 pros in the city and not one could catch him. It showed his knowledge of how they worked, his usage of routes, and his ability to fight while running. And he hadn't even bothered to teleport. It was a clear-cut statement of how good he was at his job. That's why Toshinori and Mirio were discussing him right now. So if you can avoid his first blow, your victory should be cemented. Quote. How dumb do you think Ronin is? Nezu blinked at the two, who had been discussing things and not realizing why Ronin would win in one blow, while they would need to land one blow. Nezu continued. You need to solidify to hit him. Do you think Ronin won't attack the second you come out? He tapped the reference image they recreated of the range of the slash dimension. This attack seems to only affect Ronin's clothes, but not Ronin himself. He uses it on you, whatever you solidify is getting sliced. He can stand inside it for as long as he likes. Do you have any way to counter that? Quote. A punch. Mirio was trying to be positive, but being positive when fighting Ronin was a hard subject. That's why Nezu only thought of himself as testing the vigilante, to avoid discouraging himself. If my punch creates air blasts like All Might's, I can hit him from a range. Nezu nodded. Good. It might not work, but a safer strategy than running up and trying to exchange blows. But enough about fighting him. If we play this outright, we never will. Mirio, what do you think of Ronin? As a person, an opponent, however you view him. Mirio took a second to form his thoughts. The general public had the same reaction towards him that most people had towards things like underground rivers. People noticed that they existed, were slightly surprised, and moved on with sparing them much thought. Those that met Ronin though told many wildly different stories of a monster that shredded every opponent that crossed its path, that he could cut a man to ribbons and put them back together without lasting damage, or that he had switch outfits and went to Hosu even though he was seen the next day in Musudafu. Mirio now knew of the real Ronin. Quote. He's very skilled at what he does. He avoids anything he doesn't think he can win. He's not a direct threat to heroes because he usually runs away instead of fighting us. He was turning over the information in his head. He created a new wave of vigilantism single-handedly but is detached from other vigilantes. Maybe he doesn't like working with others. It helps him keep his information on a tight leash. And he's very good physically. Ronin doesn't use his quirk in most fights for some reason. Maybe he treats it like a last resort. Nezu and Toshinori nodded. Excellent deductions. Nezu clapped with a big smile. I hope you will always remember to think over your opponents instead of overthinking them. Perhaps you will get to see Ronin someday in the... Beep. Nezu's head snapped towards the cameras, whispering to himself. Quote. I'll see you when the festival is. No way. How the hell does he walk with balls that big? Nezu started laughing as the other two men in the room exchanged confused looks. Quote. Sir, are you alright? Ronin said. He'd come after the hee-hee. Festival ended. It officially ended 1 minute ago and Nezu tapped the camera. On it, a man wearing a cloak and an old Japanese straw hat entered the gates. He's here. Chapter and notes. Usually, I write the notes after I finish the entire chapter, but these two paragraphs are written after the first spear training when Midoriya hits a tenth of a second on his stab. Not his thrust, his stab. I don't think it's physically possible to get as good as Midoriya does, but to be fair, he does spend entire days training singular moves and it's not as fast as you think. Midoriya's stab, not thrust, is a tenth of a second. So from starting position to stabbing someone is a tenth of a second. His thrust, however, is not a tenth of a second. It's from starting position and back to starting position, including the stab and withdrawing the spear, meaning his actual time is about double what's listed. It just sounds cooler as a tenth, and I'm not sure how many people read these but I hope most. Back to the dumb man making jokes about how god-awful his own writing is. You can't just keep writing chapters with very little thought and no sleep and put in arcs. Haha, keyboard go clicky clacky. Covering more of the spear, we're going to fully learn the spear before we switch to making new weapons right now. We still have slashing to learn, then double-ended techniques to learn, ending off with using the shaft. A comment just posted about this, so don't worry, I'm going to try and get the most out of this spear. A few names have been submitted and they're all Japanese, and I am so American my blood type is O for obesity. If all the suggested names are Japanese, I'm probably going to pick the easiest one to type so I don't misspell it and never notice. I hope you all enjoy these bar scenes. Maybe I'll even name the bar someday. I like writing them, just slip on some generic bar noises from YouTube, some relaxing jazz, and get writing. It's fun to write banter between Maruko and who she thinks might be a civilian. Maruko's finally taking an interest in martial arts, now that someone is showing her just how violent they can be. Not the shit with 1,000 rules that's not like a real fight at all, not something that's only good for running in circles while she beats up everyone in the subway according to her, something that makes fighting cooler and helps you beat up tons of people. There was never a time indicator, but all those beatings took under a minute. Maruko also never reported that she teamed up with Ronin because it'd be bad for her street cred. Especially since she couldn't catch him. We'll go into more detail with the parkour stuff later, but right now I just want to focus on the spear. I'll write in some more parkour techniques next time Wednesday rolls around. For those wondering why Ronin showed up, the UA Sports Festival takes most of the day so he'd be arriving after his parkour training. He originally said he'd come after the UA Sports Festival ended, and Nezu thought he meant the next day, not literally walking in the second it ended. Happy trails, happy times, and happy hour is soon so I'ma go get some cheap appetizers. Laters. Chapter 50. Chapter summary. The school festival has ended. The crowds are leaving. The vendors are packing up. The Ronin, however, approaches. Over 1,000 heroes. In a small place. Do you think he'll ever start thinking things through? Chapter notes. Yo. Second notes at the beginning ever. I think. I dunno. I wanted to put something fun in, and I'm not sure if there's any fan art of Ronin because it's literally impossible to look up. The name is so generic I can never quite tell if there's any, but I don't think there is. If you did make some and I missed it, might be. Anyway, I watched 3 drawing tutorials, didn't pay attention, and drew anyway. These are the early designs of the Ronin costume from the street fight with high schoolers in Chapter 4 and the office fight against toxin lovers in Chapters 7 to 8. I don't like chapters that are just fan art, because for me that seems something you could add to the end of an already existing chapter, but that's just me because I get hyped for a story to continue and find out I've been duped by myself. Been wondering if I should label the arcs, or just leave them as is. IDK, here's some crappy art followed by a crappy fanfic. I had to make a DeviantArt account just for this, and that took longer than one of the drawings. Hope you like it. See the end of the chapter for more notes. First Ronin design and second Ronin design. The crowds should have been mostly gone, but this was a chance to be inside. UA people still loitered around, admiring the scenes. Most of the stalls had sold out by the third day. No one paid attention to the slowly moving cloak figure. It was small and had a strange walk, seeming to drift across the ground rather than walk. The ghost floated through the remaining crowds, leaving for the main UA building. It swiped a badge at the door and slipped inside. The halls were mostly empty, save for a few odd students and heroes. The teachers would all be busy right now with the festival. The ghost sat itself down, waiting for someone to pick it up. They said earlier they'd be coming once the festival ended, so it shouldn't take long. The few people inside might have been wary at first of the strange figure, but were calmed by its lack of movement. It didn't seem to be a villain, otherwise, why would it wait at the entrance? Nezu was a slight jumble of nerves as he entered the entrance hall, carried on Mirio's shoulder and tailed by Toshinori. He sat by the entrance, the epitome of calm. Heroes walk mere feet from the second most wanted man in Musudafu, and now the 196th most wanted man in the country. Quote. I'm glad to see you, Mr. Nezu. His voice was stronger than before. The tension from before was gone, he seemed even more relaxed than before. The real Ronin rose, bowing regally toward the trio. It is an honor to be invited here. His politeness cut through their defenses, and his eyes fixated on Mirio. Quote. You are Mirio, correct? Yes, excellent work today. I can't say what kind of person you are, but you do good work. Might I ask for an autograph? Wouldn't mind getting one before you become a new top 10 hero. He spoke with such confidence, it was hard to deny him. Flattery flowed down his tongue like a leaf drifting in a babbling brook. Quote. Yes, I can. Mirio took the offered notebook and pen, signing it. On a page written all about him. He noticed the theoretical limits on how long he could hold his breath in his new super strength, but this was just the end of the notes on him. The pages he couldn't see surely had more. Quote. This is just some small studies. Pen and notebook slipped from his grasp and back into the folds of the cloak. That's not what I'm here for, although it was a pleasure to meet you. Ronin shook his still outstretched hand. Mirio noticed for the first time just how small Ronin really was. There was half a foot between them easily. Still, the hand had a firm grip despite being dwarfed in his. Ronin didn't seem to notice or mind, however, and continued. Nezu, I have come to negotiate our deal. Where do you want me to sit while we discuss? Ronin slipped his hand out from the grip with ease, now looking up at the mammal on Mirio's shoulder. Right away. Mirio, you can go now. Nezu slipped off the boy's shoulder, facing both Toshinori and Mirio with a spin of the heel. Toshinori, please make sure the festival is going along well. Power Loader should be in his office, and maybe we can arrange a schedule for our, deal. Nezu led the vigilante away from the rising and already professional heroes. If you looked very closely, you could see the tension of an unforeseen future in the eyes of the mammal who had thought he foresaw everything. Midoriya twirled his umbrella despite the lack of rain. They both knew what it really was. Insurance for him, a counter to any surprise Yue tried to throw his way. Its presence helped him stay in the serene mindset. The twist was that, while they both knew what it represented, they didn't know what it actually was. Ronin did bring his sword, but it wasn't in the umbrella. It was locked at his side, only to be used as a last resort. The umbrella instead hid a strange metal piece with a crossguard and 3 shafts within its folds, ready to be assembled into his spear. Even from the hall, he could still hear some people working in their destination. It seemed R&D never quite ended, not for the support division. Ronin opened the door for Nezu, letting him go in first in case there was an ambush. He followed after, ready to punt the midget up and use him as a shield at a moment's notice. The room was as big as he remembered, but there was just Power Loader and a pink-haired girl talking. Well, Power Loader scolding a pink-haired girl who wasn't listening. Nezu managed to get Power Loader's attention. The guest here is the one we owe a favor. They wish. Midoriya bowed slightly. It is a pleasure to meet you, Power Loader. Could I have your autograph? Midoriya offered his notes again, already open to a new page for Power Loader. He looked a little weird without his mech suit, but he still wore most of his hero costume, like his giant helmet. He looked Midoriya over, doing the math. There was no point in hiding it, his mask gave it away. Yes, I am Ronin. The mask you designed is very good for its weight, and the visibility is excellent. Power Loader bristled when he found out the thief was not just in front of him but confirming his suspicions. This increased even more when he realized they had agreed to give this little thief more technology. Midoriya's admittance also caught the attention of the pink-haired girl. You are busy, so I'll just be arranging a time to come by and make something with you. How are you this Friday? This Saturday. I'm busy this Sunday, I'm afraid, and any earlier won't give you the chance to set up some sort of trap. Hey, are you trying to say I'd booby trap one of my own creations? Are you also saying I can't make a trap in one night? Midoriya nodded to both. He intended to destroy whatever they made together and recreate it on his own for that exact reason. He needed to be there not to ensure it wasn't trapped but to make sure it wasn't made of anything hard to get. Quote. Yup, nice summary. So, Saturday. Midoriya had his notes out, taking in the contents of the room for any ideas on what he wanted. I'm willing to come here if you sign a paper that you won't ambush me. Oh, can I do it? The pink-haired girl butted in. I'm free Saturday. Are you really Ronin? Do you fight with any armor? What's your full arsenal? She rushed forward but was blocked by his umbrella. Please calm down, Ms. Now, Power Loader, please give me something to work with. A date, a time, and a location or a signature. I'd sign it. The pink-haired girl turned to Power Loader. Come on, I can do it, just give me permission, sensei. Midoriya finally figured out where he saw her. She was a first year who gave up after advertising her wares in the final tournament. Showed how far she got, and her equipment wasn't bad. Just too big for what he wanted. Quote. Fine, this is Hatsume, and she'll design your item for you. With me. Midoriya cut him off. If I'm not satisfied with it, I'll turn the finished product and blueprints back to you and have you design my item with me instead. How's that? Power Loader weighed it up, then nodded. Hatsume, this looks like your first commission. Set up a time with this thief, and then prepare some ideas. Saturday's great. You said Saturday earlier, right? I have to work on all the commissions I got from being in the sports festival on school days. She was very high energy and washed over Midoriya, who was trying to stay calm and hold her back at the same time. Do you have armor? Do you need it? What's your quirk? I need to know if it will interfere with the design. Don't worry about the design, Miss Hatsume. Midoriya kept crushing any advance she tried to make. I will be bringing the design. Your job will be to help me make it into a reality by proving how stupid an idea it was. He bowed, thanking Nezu and Power Loader for this chance and asking Power Loader to sign his notes. He still didn't, but at least Midoriya tried. I'll want to meet you to plan it earlier then. How about a quick brainstorming session on Thursday? 12:45. That's during my lunch, so I won't miss any time to work. Ronin nodded. If your principal and sensei are fine with it. A meeting to plan everything out worked fine for him. He'd need to gather materials and make sure all the things they picked he could get. Nezu nodded, and Midoriya refocused on the Hatsume. Alright, where can I find you tomorrow? I don't eat lunch, so right here. Don't worry, I'll get the blueprints all set up. She gave him a big thumbs up and a bigger smile. She seemed quite enthusiastic about this whole process, and it slightly worried him. Alright, goodbye. He bowed to her and walked out with Nezu, still hearing the grumbles of Power Loader. He didn't mind too much. He wasn't hurt that one of his idols wouldn't sign his notes. He wasn't. Thursday was a great day for Midoriya, getting to come back to school and see the usual mess. He was finishing up all his classes and now just going as far as his teachers had material. Next month should be fun. The biggest change was that, out of the 4 people who were usually in class before him, there seemed to be a missing figure. Instead of the person slumped over in the back, there was a tall figure wrapped in only 2 coats with their hair draped over their head and a beanie over it all. The beanie was a little hard pressed to stay on her with how big she was, and other hats probably couldn't go that far with all that hair and skull. Her body was still hidden, but she was much more energetic, as in actively looking out the window. Eiko waved hello to him as he came in, and he waved back, despite the strange glances he got from the other 3 who got there before him. It was the 3 faction leaders, excluding the workout boys who were running laps until a minute before school started. Nobody still wanted to mess with Eiko it seemed, and coming in he could see what happened to the sliding door to their classroom, or where it went. Someone had flung it open like a push door, then broke it by walking over it. It seemed Eiko's excitement also led to an increase in her strength. Maybe it just had to do with her heart rate. You could even follow her trail by the things she accidentally hit on the way to her desk. There was a footprint in the side of the teacher's desk where she might have accidentally run into it that he didn't remember seeing last time he came in here. She talked to him about it at lunch. For now, he sat down and began to work on the last of his math work. Class was quick, with everyone avoiding the 2 quietly focused students. Eiko felt great. The doctor said that the first 2 surgeries were the worst, and she got to have both over the break. The next blood implants should go even better. Other than the initial pain from being stabbed and the weird feelings, she felt a lot more energetic and warm. She'd have worn 3 coats, but she opted for her dad's old wool coat and one of hers. That was warm enough to keep her going if you threw in her cute beanie. She smiled beneath the curtain of hair, admiring at how hyper she felt. Or rather, how tired she didn't feel. Breathing was easier, focusing was easier, and she didn't break any doors that she actually cared about. Pluses all around the board. Midoriya had waved hello earlier, and she was excited to try making something with him. Maybe they could hang out afterward. She always wanted to try physical activities, but even walking for too long left her feeling faint. She adjusted her hat. Maybe they could make matching hats, or those bracelet things you were supposed to give to friends. Midoriya went off to lunch followed by Eiko. She ran to catch up with him in the hallway but didn't talk for some reason. They didn't talk at all until they got to their club room, where she exploded. It's so good to see you. He got wrapped up in a crushing hug that made some tackles feel like the breeze. The blood thing went great, and I should be fine after a few months. She dropped him as she sat down at the table, holding her face between her hands and swaying back and forth. Then I can swim, and go to zoos, and play sports, and see animals. She descended into rambling, talking a lot faster than she usually did. It was good to hear she wasn't as tired anymore. The effects were starting to show, with her usually pale skin having a little more color. Having more blood also helped the muscles and boosted her physical endurance overall, so she could use her strength more and more. Midoriya pulled out his lunch and the 2 ate, Midoriya with his usual steady speed and Eiko eating much faster but taking breaks to gush about whatever popped into her head. She usually cut herself off and seemed to ramble almost as much as he did. Is she just a female version of me? That would explain why they got along pretty well, but their interests were too different. Midoriya liked heroes and fighting, Eiko liked warm things and bodily contact. It made sense that she would since her own body would crave the heat that it couldn't generate. Their mumbling and not showing what they really liked was pretty similar though. So. She placed her hat on the table. I was thinking, we could make that. Midoriya looked it over, lifting it up. It was bigger than his whole head. He dropped it on just to see if anything stuck out, but it went over like a sheet. It did look pretty stretched though. You wanna knit this? Shouldn't we make it bigger for you? Midoriya questioned as he pulled it off, checking how thick the yarn was. Eiko nodded vigorously. Yeah, and I wanna. She kept trying to say something but couldn't work it out. Midoriya nodded along until he checked the clock. Eiko, don't mean to be rude, but I think it's time for you to head back. She checked the phone and nodded. Alright, I'll see you soon, bye. She ran out at top speed, then ran back to grab her lunchbox and bolted something beyond her top speed judging by how she opted to jump through a window to get away faster the second time. Man, she's fast. Man, he's fast. 12:30 and he was there. Nezu waved hello to Ronin, who bowed to him. You didn't need to come in person. Ronin barely broke his own pace in the bow, heading towards him. His confidence dominated his surroundings. All Might, or the threat of him, would have sufficed. Can't be too sure you wouldn't show up unexpectedly. Again, don't you worry, as few people as possible know you're here. Come, it seems our excitable mechanic was forced to come to lunch regardless of her own feelings on the matter. Nezu led the volatile bomb along, always aware of that umbrella and the thing that carried it. Why did I get so few offers? Kaminari screamed while headbutting his desk. Quote. Because you didn't do well. Jiro responded, playing with one of her earlobes. Seriously, not only did you lose in the first round, you lost the fastest of all the students. Even Monoma lasted longer. Hey, what do you think I am? Monoma glared her down. How was I supposed to know I needed to silently beat up that insomniac? Study, now shut up. Aizawa rubbed his head. Get to lunch and pick someone to internship for by the end of school, Friday. Go be someone else's problem. Kaminari's problem was he knew exactly who he wanted to intern for, but he didn't have a listing. It seemed all of the US staff didn't have any internships, but he could ask. Hey, Aizawa-sensei, if we want to intern for someone not on the list, can we ask them? Is there like, a form? Aizawa blinked, then rubbed his head. Quote. Did your parents forget to submit the application? Both of Kaminari's parents were heroes and did submit a report. Separate reports for some reason, probably they didn't check with the other. As much as he didn't want to admit it, them forgetting was totally something they'd do. It was something he'd do too. No, that's not the point. So, is there some way I can get someone who isn't on the list? A paper or something I can get them to sign. Kaminari batted his eyes and tried to look as innocent as possible. And while it didn't work on Aizawa, he was too tired to give a shit either way. He pulled out a paper and tossed it. Get that signed, then check with Principal Nezu. Do it on your own time, but your parents should be able to submit everything. Kaminari nodded and smiled, running away. He dashed to catch up with his class to the lunchroom. There was some pink-haired girl arguing about appointments, tons of talking, and his buds were getting lunch and marking their table. Life was good, holy shit. He looked at the cloaked figure standing mysteriously next to Nezu. He played video games, man, and every sign under the sun said that guy was a secret mentor just waiting to happen. That hat, that cloak, that mask that he recognized. Kaminari ran past his table. Don't put tape on my seat again, I'll be back, Tilda. Midoriya and Nezu walked into the mess, giving him a moment to marvel at the rich kids. God, he hated it. It was so loud, how was anyone supposed to get homework done? It just seemed annoying. He scanned for the pink-haired girl, but there were so many pink-haired girls it was harder than he first thought. Nezu was too short to be a help, so it was all on him. Midoriya's eyes moved across the room, investigating every person until... Hey, I was looking for you. Kaminari was standing right in his line of vision. He had on a big cheesy smile and looked very pleased with himself. He had a paper in his hand and hid it behind his back. So, you know about hero internships, right? Midoriya nodded. I do. I am unsure what you are doing though, or where this is going. Can I please intern under you? Kaminari thrust out the paper and bowed. I need a lot of help, and I think you'd be great at giving it to me. I've practiced what you already taught me every day. I taught him something. Midoriya was pretty sure he'd just spat bullshit for 30 minutes and called it a night. Nezu, however, was looking at him very interested. Kaminari, you wish to intern under him. You do know who he is, correct? Quote. Ronin, right. I know I normally couldn't, but he's here, and you're here, so could you please let me? Kaminari seemed to want this pretty badly, but as much as Midoriya wanted people to learn more about martial arts, he had someone to teach martial arts to already. Himself. Quote. You trained with my technique every day. Kaminari nodded and walked right into the trap. Then what were you doing at the sports festival? You could see him freeze in place, giving off a little scream from his bow. Well, you see. Kaminari was stuck in his pseudo bow, trying to reason. Nezu stuck up for him. Students can only bring a support item into the sports festival if they made it themselves. Midoriya nodded, getting an idea in his head. Wasn't sure he liked it, but he might take it. Wasn't like he was going to do any vigilante activities for the rest of the duration of the internships. They happened every year, and he didn't intend to extend his past the due date. Training someone to do what you did was one of the ways to prove you mastered it. Quote. First, Nezu, would you accept it? Nezu looked delightedly, and Midoriya could already imagine that Kaminari would be grilled the second he got back from even his first lesson. Yes, of course. I love to see students pursuing what they need, and perhaps this will lead to a wonderful bond. Nezu should have learned to hide his emotions better. He looked like a supervillain on the verge of maniacal laughter. Quote. Second, what time do I have you? Afternoon to what? This one was again directed at Nezu but framed at Kaminari. I have my own things to do. 5 days during afternoon hours. And a little more if you feel like it. Nezu once again chipped in. He won't be staying with you, and it will usually be from 1 o'clock to 8 o'clock. That was pretty late. He'd also have to skip club meetings for a school week. Do I have to sign off on hours? Yes, but it shouldn't be a problem. We expect you to give him the full hero experience too, but that should be no problem for a pro like yourself. Nezu smiled and nodded. I understand. Kaminari, give me the paper. Do you have anything after school today? Kaminari blinked while he stole the paper, reading through the legal jargon quickly and trying to find anything that forced him to give away his identity, then pointing it out to Nezu to sign away. No one should trust a vigilante this much. Something was going on, and he wasn't sure what. Unluckily for them, he wasn't in a vigilantism mood. No sir. He saluted sharply. Midoriya nodded. You have a sword. Kaminari shook his head, and Midoriya nodded. Good. You know Hatsume. We're looking for her, and you're coming along now. Midoriya had a vague idea of some things he wanted to experiment with, but now it had been funneled down to an experiment he wanted to try. And with someone else as the guinea pig, he felt a lot more comfortable trying it. They looked at the exasperated student, who was delighted to see them. Principal Nezu. Ronin. Random guy. I'm so glad to see you. Power Loader locked the shop up for lunch and I can't get in. Can't you do something, please? Midoriya once again kept her back with his umbrella. How unprofessional are you? The other students looked happy at the strange man chastising her for going too far before their hopes were cut off by his continued speech. Do you think business only happens in a shop? If we have to do it here, we will do it here. Kaminari, pull a chair up. Nezu, I don't care. He sat down himself, taking out a notebook while Hatsume smiled as if she just got to meet All Might for the first time before he crushed all her hopes and dreams. Maybe he was projecting a little hard, rein it in Midoriya. He flipped through his notes. The item we'll be making is a sword for you, Kaminari. We'll get the length down, and then go from there. Got it. I get a sword. I'm just making a sword. Kaminari was excited, while Hatsume looked a little disappointed. No Kaminari, you and I are making a sword. Hatsume right. Good, you're going to make a quick draw sheath. We'll be devising some way to speed up the drawing motion. Springs, rocket propulsion, I don't care right now. Saturday we're going to come back together, finish making the sheets you thought up, and test them. He lost them for a moment but got Hatsume back quickly. Kaminari was still catching up. I have high expectations for you. Midoriya rose again. It was good talking at you. Don't you mean talking to? I know what I said. Kaminari, 4:30 tonight. Will you be free? Yeah, I can be. His enthusiasm wasn't going to last long. Excellent. Make your way to Takoba Seaside Beach. Shouldn't be too out of the way for you. Yes sir. Thank you, sir. And sir. Kaminari saluted like a soldier but then broke form, cocking his head. Where's Takoba Seaside Beach? Chapter end notes. Man, this sure exists. Getting those stupid pictures to work was the hardest part of this chapter. Not a lot happened, but remember, if you want to test something dangerous and possibly lethal, the best way to do it is to get someone else to do it for you. Hey, more people are meeting Ronin in person, even if Midoriya doesn't consider himself Ronin right now. Mirio finally gets to meet Ronin, even if Ronin doesn't think too much of Mirio yet. To be fair to the kid, he does have other things to think about. Since Midoriya plans to rebuild whatever they make, there's no harm in letting someone else keep the original version since he'll get to see how it's made. Any hidden tricks are things he doesn't need since his version should be able to replicate any functions the original had. You thought it'd be Ronin and Maruko learning together, but it was me, Ronin and Kaminari. If she just reacted a little faster she might have gotten the internship. It's not called an internship in the show but more of a showing the ropes. It takes place over what I thought was one day in canon but was actually 1 week, which is great because the students would actually go insane if they had to deal with this bullshit at the same pace the canon goes at. This chapter was mostly set up for a different spin on the intern apprenticeship thing. Hope I can make it interesting. Chapter 51. Chapter 51. Chapter summary. A training montage, but not for our lead. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. After Midoriya finished giving directions, he thanked Hatsume and finished the last of the paperwork before running away. He had about an hour to do the hat thing today, but for planning, that was more than enough. Midoriya descended into the sewers, practicing his wall running and jumping. He wasn't entirely sure, but he thought he was doing quite well, maybe a little better than earlier. It seemed slowing down his pace was helping him to even faster than before. He sprung back into the classroom and switched clothes. Then he went straight back into his spear training. He needed to think of something he could teach Kaminari, and the best way to think of something was to focus on something else so the interrupting thoughts would be helpful. He knew what he wanted to do with Kaminari before the week of training. That meant he had 2 days to do the hat thing, and he'd make more time for himself tomorrow. He wouldn't need to be there with Kaminari for what he had planned. He did jab after jab, letting his thoughts flow until the alarm went off. Then he put everything away and got ready for Eiko to arrive. It only took her 20 seconds in a window dive to get to the classroom. She was taking this extra energy thing a little further than he thought she would, but onward she went. Hello Eiko, hi Midoriya, are you ready to go? Did you want to plan colors here or on the road? Do you know of any good wool stores? Are there stores that sell just wool? Stop, breathe, just relax Eiko. Midoriya shook his head, smiling at her. Yeah, I'm ready to go. If you don't know where you want to go I'll leave. Now calm down, let's go. He grabbed his few things and walked out with her, checking on his phone the nearest crafting supply store. He didn't do much with cloth, so he didn't have the way memorized. Eiko was content to fill the silence with her own ramblings. She rambled between 2 shades that were supposed to be completely different but he was pretty sure the color were too similar. She also wondered how animals would look cute when pink. She really seemed to like pink for someone who never wore it. She was perplexed when he asked about it. Of course I don't wear pink, I look terrible in pale colors like I'm sick. Dark colors make me look way better, and there are some I like. Midoriya nodded along, taking notes as they went. It seemed that some colors look better when paired with others, not that he'd noticed with his one color palette. All grays and blacks, with hints of green. Eiko told stories of how different shades sometimes looked good with each other, and other times it didn't. He might have to consult her on his next outfit. She decided on both as he told her about his plan for next week, much to her disappointment. What am I supposed to do with only myself as a building project? I can't sew. Midoriya ignored the fact that they had only done one sewing project so far. Quote. Do you actually do anything during school? Like any of the homework? She froze dead in place, boogeyman activating. Homework. What homework? Midoriya glared at her, and she sheepishly turned off boogeyman, the black aura drifting away and fading out. Tomorrow I'll send you a list of the homework we've had so far. Don't worry too hard, no one else does. He patted her on the shoulder and purchased the yarn and needles for the two of them. He'd figure out how the needles worked tomorrow before Eiko came in for their club. As the club president, that was his job. Now, I'll be dropping this stuff at school so we don't leave it at home. I'll see you tomorrow. He waved goodbye and parted ways. They'd spend more time together tomorrow. Kaminari could see Ronin standing on the beach, staring out epically. The ocean rolled before him, his hat and mask hid his face, and his cape danced in the wind. All in all, an epic silhouette as the sun shone down on him. It wasn't particularly late, but he made it feel like a sunset somehow. Quote. You're here. Ronin didn't bother turning. He just knew things. Do you know why? Quote. We're gonna make a sword, so. Kaminari rubbed his head as he glanced around the beach, covered in a thick layer of trash. The aspiring hero had changed out of his UA uniform into some casual clothes, thank God. The cleaning bill from standing around in all this trash would be nothing to sneeze at. Are we standing in garbage cause we're hoping someone already threw a sword out? Not quite, but this will tie into making your sword. Ronin held up a discarded computer, a little damaged by the weather but the outside still looked alright. The tide brings trash here naturally. People use that as an excuse to leave their trash here, but they also leave a few useful things. You can even find gold if you know where to look in this mess. Quote. Like, a sword. Kaminari took a stab at where this was going as Ronin pried open the computer, chuckling at Kaminari's response. A bit more literally, Kaminari. Inside the discarded computer there were still a lot of parts. Kaminari didn't know what most of them were, but his eyes were drawn in as Ronin plucked a small piece of golden metal out from the hardware Oh wait, that was gold. Like, straight up, in Ronin's hands was a very small tiny piece of gold. It's not much, but we have to start somewhere. Ronin's attention went outward, the vigilante pointing across the sea of trash and even to the sea of water beyond. You and I are going to collect it today and tomorrow, then use what we collect to make your sword. You'll start without me, but we're just going to collect these circuit boards right now. I'll handle the disassembly. Quote. Really? That's it? Kaminari laughed. I thought this was gonna be hard. Why is this so hard? Kaminari's hands hurt from opening these computers. The first 10 were fine. Next 20. Alright. Next 30. Manageable. But they never ended. Take your time. There's no point in rushing. Kaminari just hit 100, but Ronin shredded through computers and even other things, adding all the gold he collected to a plastic bag he kept on his hip. Kaminari had one as well, but already there was an obvious difference in how many they'd each collected. Ronin might have started out a little slower than Kaminari, but it was the fact he never slowed that made such a difference. Your hands might be getting sore soon, so work slowly. I am working as slowly as I can. Kaminari held up a screwdriver and miniature computer tower to emphasize his point. And my hands are already sore. How are you going so fast? Quote. Practice. Ronin quickly twisted the screwdriver, slipping it in and out of screws and using the screwdriver itself to crowbar the lid open. He took the circuit board out quickly, then moved on to the next one, finding no screws and skipping to crowbarring it open too. Get used to repetition. Kaminari sighed, wondering what he signed himself up for, and got back to work. The first lesson Kaminari learned that day was to stop counting. He didn't want to discourage himself. They kept the circuit board things in the same grocery bags, he knew he didn't even fill half of one. How much you did doesn't matter. Ronin finished stacking the desktops and laptops they had already cleaned out while putting the mess to one side so he didn't accidentally reopen one of them and waste their time. It's like heroism. That you did anything is good, and the effort you put in is how good it really is, and you did good work. Ronin packed up the grocery bags and double-bagged them, then gave Kaminari a pat on the back while exchanging a smile. You helped me do more than I could have on my own, and that's what heroes are supposed to do. They help. Civilians, each other, doesn't matter. Kaminari glanced down at the bags they'd done, then at his hands. Even if it hadn't seemed like a lot, the math added up. Together, they had gotten more done than just one could do on their own. Together, he might have seemed small, but he still helped. Tomorrow, I'll show up at 5:30. You just be there before me, even if you're not doing anything. Ronin walked away, waving goodbye without looking. Kaminari looked at the retreating figure, then at the grocery bags still left on his hip. He knew he wasn't smart, everyone in 1A did. But this didn't require a brain. Just effort, time, and a lot of free time. Like the amount of time it took to get through a new rock album or two. He checked his phone. He had an hour or two. Kaminari hit shuffle on his playlist, took his screwdriver, and began to pry open another computer. Midoriya finished separating gold from the circuit boards. He had to use a bucket with just how many circuit boards they got. It was insane how many computers had been dumped, giving him the most expensive part for free. Usually, the computer parts with gold cost the most, while the chemicals used to get the gold were cheap if you knew where to get them. He didn't even have to buy that much, he already had some of everything. The hydrogen peroxide and hydrochloric acid had separated the gold from the circuit boards and now he was dissolving out the gold in more hydrochloric acid, but this time with bleach instead of hydrogen peroxide. In the last step, he reformed the gold with sodium metabisulfate. Why was he getting a better chemistry lesson here, helping out some idiot, than in his own school? You were supposed to do this for a week, but instead, Midoriya cheated. Using some of the scraps of possessed metal from his air guns and running an extremely low voltage, he fed in more oxygen and sped the reaction for the first step up. Midoriya had to check up and finish collecting the gold before he went to school. He now had the completed gold fragments, over 10 grams of the stuff. Not bad for their first day. They'd need about 40 grams for what he intended, so he'd be staying late and going in early to make sure it was properly finished. He was doing the math for this internship project as he went to school, as he finished another class for the year, and was still doing it when he went to the club room with an incredibly happy Eiko. She brought a book from the library on sewing. He didn't even know the school had a library. She started practicing between bites but wasn't getting very far. She wanted to add a smiley face pattern to hers but wasn't sure how. Midoriya assured her Google could teach her wonders. Then they parted ways, and he ran back to the beach to continue gathering supplies. The piles were a little different than he remembered, but it didn't matter. Midoriya took the gold from parts other than computers, saving those for Kaminari. They were the easiest to work with, and so it was best for someone who didn't know what they were doing. Midoriya got in a solid hour and a half before he ran away with the salvaged pieces, running home and adding them to the chemicals, the running all the way back to school. All in all a lot of running, but it'd be over soon. For now, he had to stab his hands with some needles. How are you so good, Midoriya? I thought you said you'd never sewed. Eiko put a finger probably in her mouth to suck the blood while rummaging for another band-aid. Was hurting herself part of her quirk? I take my time, so slow down and don't rush. I'm here for another hour, you know. I knew we should have bought a loom. He really wanted to but wasn't sure they'd need it or use it again. After hearing her scream for the 12th time, he was assured just this one use would have been enough. Ah, this is my last band-aid, do you have any? He threw 3 of his from his emergency supplies at her. Thanks. Don't worry, just calm down, and act. Don't rush. Didn't I just say don't rush? I'm pretty sure I said don't rush. She put the new bandage, tiny as it looked on her digit. Eiko, you want a thimble? We can buy thimbles. No, I can do this. She was probably doing something like a pout, but it didn't work since he couldn't see her face. Quote. Next time you stab yourself, we're buying thimbles. She straightened and finally slowed down. She still made the occasional idle comment, speaking whatever thought popped into her head. The two worked in this pseudo-silence for the rest of the hour before Midoriya tied his off to finish later. I've got to run, so you get to close up. You get any more injuries, the nurse's office is only open for 30 more minutes. See you next week. She waved him off, but he didn't go far. He came back into the bathroom and switched clothes, then blitzed through the sewers. He came back to the beach and saw 3 bags filled with circuit boards. The fuck? Kaminari was working hard ahead, opening another computer and pulling out the circuit boards before closing and tossing them into a pile, then moving on to the next one. He had a great rhythm going. Kaminari, nice work. Ronin approached over the trash, nodding in honest admiration for Kaminari's work as the aspiring hero finally snapped out of his trance, waving hello and laughing as he looked over his own work. Really, it's mostly stuff from yesterday. I stayed a little longer, then I got into this groove, and my music was really good. Kaminari didn't even stop right now, pulling out the circuit boards and tossing his current computer, then emptied his pockets into the grocery bag. They easily had hundreds of them now. Midoriya stopped the student as he moved to the next computer. We have enough gold for now, Kaminari. Now, we're moving on to the next thing. Midoriya glanced around, then chose a path, dashing over the trash and debris. He scaled broken appliances like even ground, stopping atop a refrigerator. Right now, all we've done is get things for your sword. Now, I'm going to teach you a technique. Quote. Another ninja thing. Midoriya shook his head slightly, laughing. He had experimented a little, but he wasn't sure how to teach Kaminari. It seemed repetition would be the best way forward. We're going to refine an old technique into a real fighting move. His right hand rose, beckoning the student forward. Show me your thunderclap and flash, Kaminari. Kaminari lined up his feet, then burst forward in the sand. He could move 5 meters in a second from a dead stop, with no push-off. It was impressive, but it was just the start. Usually I'm better than this. Is it because I'm tired? 5 meters was the distance that he went last time, but that was when he first started. He'd been practicing for hours, but right now couldn't show any real results. He couldn't get why though, and it didn't make sense. He wasn't that sore right now. It's the sand. Ronin pointed down from on high, sitting cross-legged on the refrigerator. It's hard to run in the sand because it's not a solid base. On top of that, you're right. You've been working what? 2 hours. About 2 hours in, you should be pretty tired. His teacher tossed him a blue drink thing. Gatorade. Not sure what flavor you liked, so I went with generic. Enjoy it and watch. Ronin rose, then seemed to disappear. While he had to take a second to get into the pose, Ronin could switch into it at a moment's notice. It was like he teleported across the garbage, appearing atop a washing machine with an imprint from behind hit. You can't replicate the sword swings yet, but that's fine. He appeared in front of Kaminari, moving 3, maybe even 4 times the speed Kaminari demonstrated. Swordsmanship looks like it's all arms, but everything starts at the legs. The feet will form a base, and the legs move you to where you want to go. Can't hit someone from a mile away, right? Kaminari nodded and Ronin turned, pointing down to his feet. The distance between your legs should be the same as if you wanted to tie your shoes. You'll push off with your toes but land on the entire foot. Don't worry too much. Watch my feet. He pointed out where he was going to go, and took his time on this run. His heels rose and dug into the sand, then pushed off the base he formed as he strode across the ground. Ronin leaned forward, every step pushing not straight down but slightly backward. His knees rose over his hips as he moved, taking powerful snapping steps that pushed him up and forward. Ronin stopped atop the refrigerator again, turning to face him. Learn these steps. 100 reps, 100 of 100 reps, no matter how long it takes. Natural talent hits walls. Passion burns itself out. But discipline. Ronin squatted slightly, flexing his feet. Then, he was gone. No, he was nearby. Ronin seemed to fly as he moved, striking off the nearby objects and onto the refrigerator. Kaminari wondered what he was doing. Then one dent appeared, and another. And another. Dents appeared faster and faster, hitting harder and harder until the refrigerator dislodged itself from the sand and swayed slightly from the impacts. The once square, boxing refrigerator had been beaten into a circular form, the metal cracked and dented. And atop it he appeared, his weird old-fashioned cape flowing epically as it blew off him entirely, showing off his body. His usual costume was gone, replaced by baggy pants and red shoes. His sword was at his side, but he wasn't wearing a shirt right now. It showed off scars and burns adorning his chest like tattoos. Your discipline can never leave you. No one can take, and only you can get it. Ronin stood atop the partially crushed refrigerator, beaten down without a quirk, but by the same footwork Ronin used to fly around. Perhaps someday, you'll finish this old fridge. Not with the quirk your parents gave you, but the skills you earned. You dashed once. Now, dash twice. Ronin disappeared, sliding in the sand. I'll be right beside you, Kaminari. Kaminari glanced up at the figure standing over him with awe in his eyes, an empty Gatorade bottle in his hands, crushing it as he began to nod erratically. Sir. Yes, sir. Midoriya was gonna be honest, he really didn't think he'd be able to dent the refrigerator without his boots. Most of his stuff had been in the clubroom except his cloak and hat, but he had at least snuck out the sword and his helmet since he kept those with the disguise. All those reps in the sewers had paid off at least. Even now, switching directions had gotten easier. He had to put his feet below him relative to the new direction he wanted to go, then spring off. Now, the two moved across the beach. Kaminari tripped a lot but rose every single time. He hadn't even switched from his school clothes, just stitched the jacket and tie. The dashing technique wasn't for moving very long, so they stopped or paused often. Kaminari drank the most Gatorade he'd ever had in his life as they worked, performing dash after dash. The goal right now was to get him to do the dash instinctually, so he wouldn't have to be supervised. Then he could practice even when Midoriya wasn't around. While Kaminari couldn't keep the rush of speed up for long, his initial burst improved significantly with the proper technique. Overall his entire running technique improved, but what Midoriya was fishing for was that solid start, that initial push that the rest of the dash built off of. His constant wall running made him have so many starts it was basically his default state by now. The direction change Midoriya used while in the sewers was basically the start of a new run mixed with a jump, so he was pretty good at this move if he'd just sit down and learn it. It was one of his first swordsmanship moves, and though he only practiced maintaining his skills while he focused on developing his spearmanship, his drawing cut had still improved. The dashing motion of the spear thrust suited it well and lent a lot of power to the cut. Kaminari stretched his legs under Midoriya's guidance for the last set before they broke for dinner. Relax, we're almost done. We're only going to do one dash and then pause for you to breathe now. Thank God. Kaminari finished off the water bottle. He ran Midoriya out of Gatorades in 2 hours. He shook his legs before getting back into position beside Midoriya. It felt a little awkward for Midoriya, but he wasn't sure Kaminari could think that far ahead. The two bolted, starting similar enough but ending with 5 meters between them. Kaminari looked ahead and groaned. He even had gotten to use his arms while he dashed while Ronin had been keeping his arms down for the sword posture, but there was so much difference between them. Excellent job Kaminari, excellent. Ronin seemed to be overjoyed for some reason. He clapped him on the shoulder. Just keep repeating the motions, and soon you'll outpace me. Quote. What? Kaminari was really confused. Why was Ronin so happy? He hadn't done anything special, he just followed the motions, but even with the same movements, he was so much slower. Look behind you. Ronin pointed at some random skid marks in the sand. It was about 3 meters behind him, he didn't see what was so important about it. Those marks are from your first dash, before practice. Ronin seemed to eyeball it. You're what, a little under halfway between you from then and me right now. He picked up the grocery bags, putting them all inside a trash bag. I wonder how much further the you of tomorrow will go. Oh well, come on, let's bounce. I'll pay for dinner. Kaminari instantly forgot all about the things he was wondering. Really? Thanks dude. He laughed as he grabbed his stuff, following behind his master. He seemed so old and mysterious, but Kaminari wouldn't turn down a free meal. Quote. Where are we going anyway? Chapter end notes. Yigiti Eagle, only rhyme I can think of is beetle. So, from the top. Time-wise because I never stated it, Japanese classes go 50 minutes according to my research and have 5 minutes breaks. Since Ishiyama High School starts at 8 o'clock, lunch starts at 11:40 and ends at 12:10. 3 more classes and then you're done at 2:55. That means for him, club can last anywhere from an hour to 3. So there was no schedule problems with the meeting time at 4:30, since Midoriya knew that he and Eiko would just be planning and buying things on the first day, one of the fastest activities. It's why he said he wanted more time for the second day. For meters to feet, Kaminari started out by demonstrating a dash of 5 meters, or 16-ish feet. Not very impressive sounding, but from a standing start and in a second, it's more impressive than it sounds at least. Kaminari didn't actually demonstrate his best thunderclap and flash in this chapter but ended by doing a total of 8 meters in one dash, or 26 feet. That's pretty impressive, and it wasn't even in good condition. Most of this improvement wasn't because of development on his part, but learning how to properly push off nothing and move his legs. From what I think the thunderclap and flash is, it's not just one jump or push off, but a build-up of momentum to generate power quickly and create one strong hit, like a sprint. A little development and check up on Midoriya's movement, which I don't think I've ever addressed. In canon, whether on purpose or accident, Midoriya is slow as fuck. His running time is average, and when rescuing Bakugo from the league he mentions his top speed. Which is slower than mine. Like, IRL I'm faster than full Calling Deku. And I'm a boxer, not a sprinter. I'm going to throw that to bad writing. Googling average human running speed is 28 miles per hour, but it's safer to say 20 miles per hour. Wanna be bold, go for 22 miles per hour. Midoriya says it's about 6 to 7 meters between him and Bakugo and with full Calling he can get there in less than a second. Guess what, almost everyone can. Running at 15 miles per hour, almost half the average human speed according to Google, is 6.78 meters per second. Running at 20 miles per hour is 8.9 meters per second. So, we can say that Horikoshi is bad at math otherwise full Calling gives Midoriya the ability to move at the same speed as the rest of his quirkless losers and he's considered fast. He ain't no Iida, but he's one of the most mobile in 1A with full Calling. Without it, he moves a little faster than 15 miles per hour when in Season 1 Episode 5 he does the 50 meters in 7 seconds or about 7 meters a second. All in all, Midoriya is slow as fuck. Remember that. Normally, Midoriya can move about 7 meters a second, and yet his super move can allow him to move at the exact same speed. BNHA is a great story, but I'm a math major and these are the minor gripes I found when watching the show. Not a clue how I remembered all this. Sorry if my complaining is killing it. However, I want to state that yes, unlike in the canon, Midoriya is becoming physically impressive. Chapter 50 was the 1-month anniversary of this fanfic as well, and I forgot to mention it. It was another reason I did the drawing thing, but oh well. Not much of a joke here other than my own writing. Cheers. Chapter 52. Chapter 52. Chapter summary. An explanation of things we already learned, and the forging of a second sword. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya held his spear and rocked, adjusting the grip with his backhand. The chemicals were still going, and it was too early to take them out. So instead, he trained a new skill he hadn't had the chance to use. His lead hand went up and forward while his backhand went down and forward, not moving far but still moving the tip entire feet with a minor adjustment. His lead hand jutted down like a punch, his arm straightening and doing most of the traveling while his back arm stayed mostly stationing, adjusting to the lead arm. It rose to give it more power, sure, but it wasn't much power. It was acting more as the base for this attack, like a reverse stab where the lead arm guided and the back supplied power. It was the down slice and cut through the air in front of him with a sharp sound. He checked his posture, then did it again. And again, and again, and again and again. Then a side cut. His lead arm took point and was still doing most of the movement. The back arm served as the base, and the spread head surged from behind Midoriya until it crossed his central line and was in front of him. It'd be hard to push it the other way since it'd use his back muscles. It'd be a weaker cut. But with enough practice, it could become dangerous. Another tool in Ronin's arsenal. And so he practiced. Swing after swing, strike after strike. His shoulders ached, they'd been getting quite a workout these days. Thrusts that made them push, swings that made them pull, he'd been getting everything. But with muscles, that didn't take much. He drank and meditated, then checked his phone. The gold was almost finished, and now he'd just need to finish the substance. He wouldn't use it all, but a lot would be going into this. Midoriya looked up at the chirping birds, smiling. It had been a while since he'd done something like this. He wondered when he'd help someone for cheesy reasons again. Kaminari was the last one to show up at UA's own support section. Even as he came in, the door had been blown off the room. Hatsume, put that blowtorch out and away from, BOOOOM. Quote. The gas canister, away from the gas canister. Inside, power loader supervised as Hatsume took off her goggles, laughing. Ronin was sitting in the corner, checking the materials. Thanks for supplying this power loader. I'll pay you back with some of the spare gold. You don't need to. Sheesh, why is the vigilante more responsible than my own student? Huh, Hatsume. Power loader moved around the room, noticing Kaminari. Finally, you're just in time. Ronin is all set up for you, but I'll be helping you make your sword. It is a support item after all. Remember what I asked for power loader. Ronin adjusted the metals, checking everything's position. I already sent in a length it should be in the width roughly, but we should be able to create the sword quickly enough. Kaminari, come. Kaminari had no reason to refuse, walking over to the furnace. Ronin was looking over the metals, selecting the piece with tongs. Get some gloves, you're going to grab this piece of metal here and heat it up. Quote. Already. Kaminari looked around, confused. This didn't seem like something he could do. He was in the hero course, not the support course. People tend to have a better appreciation for things they created themselves. The time and effort used to make it becomes a bond. Don't worry about ruining it, power loader's much better at this than I am and I'm the one who made all of my weapons. He rose and approached Hatsume. Now, let's go test the designs you've made. What do you mean you're not done? Kaminari looked over in confusion at power loader. The pro hero nodded toward the gloves. Don't worry, we'll be taking this pretty slowly. You're just going to be working with iron right now. Just put on the gloves and hold the metal in the furnace with the tongs. Kaminari nodded, working slowly with the iron and a hero over his shoulder, telling him how to hold it, adjusting his stance and waiting, then when to bring it out. They lengthened the material on an automatic hammer, making it thinner and longer until it could no longer all be heated at once and he could settle for just holding one end without the tongs. There were no extra layers, just drawing out the metal to shape. The hammer even partially drew the edge part and curve. Then he got to sharpen it, watching Power Loader do it twice before trying once. Then another 2 watches, and he got to do it more. It was like that with the forging, and with the hammering, and now the grinding. They finished with the hardening bath and motor oil for some reason. Whatever it was, the flaming oil looked pretty cool. He didn't get most of it, but overall, the sword was pretty satisfying. What do you mean you're not done? All you needed to come up with was prototypes. Midoriya rubbed his head. I came up with more designs. Like what if the entire sheath has one giant spring in it to push out the sword versus multiple smaller ones? How long can the springs be? Oh, and I tried a few other designs too. Hatsume had a list and a whole bunch of metal sticks that'd be acting as the swords. Gas propulsion, wheel propulsion, I even tried magnetic propulsion. I've got all the samples mostly finished, but I need to reset the gas propulsion. Ronin stopped her, rubbing his head. Hatsume, how many times do you think Kaminari is going to draw his sword in a fight? He looked down at her, checking each of the pseudo swords. These were embarrassingly close to his first sword, and they weren't even meant to be real. Quote. I was going to say once, but the way you're acting is letting me know that's wrong. Midoriya nodded his head, satisfied. I'm going to ask you to do something. It won't apply as much to heroes, but it will still apply. Are you ready? He put down the prototypes. I want you to run a lap around the school, climb to the top floor, then go back down and build another prototype sheath. The whole time, you've got to hold this propane torch. Quote. I can't do that. My hand's going to be tired, and my arm will cramp, infringing on my precision. How am I supposed to make another baby like that? She stopped, thinking it over. It seemed she was capable of rational thought. Quote. I see the problem. I need to create a robotic hand to hold the sword for him. No, it needs to be reusable, and not get in the way too much when sheathing. Ronin tossed a sheathed sword from hand to hand, testing the weight. I really like the motor design. If you make it free-floating when not turned on, it could be easily sheathed too. Have you tried any of these yourself? Nope, I don't know a thing about wielding a sword. I'm leaving that to you. Glad you like it too, it was inspired by frisbee shooters. Midoriya drew the sword without turning it on, a bit of a struggle in its current state, but it could be modified. With her knack, he was sure of it. You should, otherwise how will you know if something's not functional like being unable to sheath quickly? He resheathed the sword and collected the bunch. Did you try explosive propellants, like a bullet? Quote. What? A bullet, you know. Like how the bullet forces the chamber back but turning that push into the purpose instead of a side effect. It'd force the sword and sheath apart, then both bullet and casing would fall out. You hero types do know what bullets are, right? Of course I know that, but I didn't think of it since I don't have access to any guns. Do you have some? Midoriya nodded, going over to his backpack and opening it, selecting a handgun. 6 hour, fires 10 round clips. That's 10 draws a clip. I think you're smart enough to not kill yourself without any bullets, so take it apart, but don't point it at anyone. Midoriya drew the clips out of the bag while Hatsume turned it over, muttering. I think I'll need one more for reference when I make it. You can keep the second one, but I need to see what the assembled piece looks like. Midoriya nodded, placing a second on the work table without a thought. Hatsume looked amazed. How are you getting these? They're impossible to get in Japan, and you have so many. You should see the criminals on the streets. Midoriya sealed up the bag, amazed it didn't dawn on her that this was his idea the entire time. It was an excuse to let someone else test putting a gun inside a sword sheath, with practically no risk to himself. He even brought all the parts to create it. He helped her put together the prototype with the gun mechanism, thoroughly aware that this was only useful for someone like himself. Who else would have enough bullets to actually use it, and if this sword kept developing in this direction, it would blow your arm off when trying to use it. He had to interrupt to teach her how to draw a sword. Power Loader, I might need to borrow Kaminari for a second. How is it going so far? We're on the oil bath, so he can take a break. Go see what he wants, Kaminari. He took the two of them out into a spare room designed to test equipment. Alright, Kaminari, for your technique you're going to have to learn how to unsheath a sword. Hatsume, to stop making shitty sheaths you're going to have to learn how to unsheath a sword. He put his hand on the control sword and gestured for the others to do the same. He rigged up some quick crappy belts for them. You might like holding your sword instead of keeping it on a belt, but this is the easiest style. Follow along with what I say, ask questions as they come. Left hand goes under the handguard, about an inch or two between your hand and the handguard. What's an inch? 2.54 centimeters, or 2 54/100ths. Quote. About 3 to 5 centimeters between your hand and the handguard. He made an obvious demonstration, and on the third time they figured out to copy what he was doing. Good. Put your thumb against the Subano, the handguard. Why are you bringing up tubas? What's a Suba? Quote. The handguard's real name is the Suba. He was starting to dislike this question everything mentality. Thumb against the Suba. Push against the Suba until the sword comes out. Don't just watch me, do it yourselves. He wished he could rub his head or take some drugs for the headache they were giving him. Quote. Alright, after you get used to the feeling of pushing it out, start from the beginning. Start from when your hand isn't on the sheath. How far do I have to put my hand again? On average, 4 centimeters. Oh, thanks. Midoriya stared at the heavens as the two of them practiced the motion. Hatsume looked at it as she moved. So that's why the ease of draw matters so much. If it's too hard, the thumb can't start the draw. I will need to adjust the spring motion in the motor. Whoa, this is a lot harder than it looked. Kaminari just moved at those few centimeters, amazed. Great, now that you're all ready, question sensei. Why's the blade pointing up? I almost cut my thumb, dude. Quote. I also had that question. Quote. We'll get there in a few minutes. Please, focus. Your right hand will grab the sword with this position. He showed his hand grab the handle from different angles so they could see how their fingers should move. Then, you're going to start from the beginning, hands off the sheath. When I say so, you put both your hands on the sheath at the same time and do the thumb push. Got it. Let me know if you got it, stop staring. Yes, sensei dude. Yup, he should have taken some medicine before he came. Go. Resheath, and again. And again, and again. A few minutes later, Hatsume was shaking her left hand. Their thumbs were cramping from the repeated motion. We'll break for water. Kaminari, go back to check up on the sword. Hatsume, we'll finish learning to draw the sword. He sat back while she recuperated, writing down the ideas. The spring that could launch the sword to aid the thumb, like the gun's sliding top. It seemed mixing designs would be the best option. She was getting some good ideas from trying to use it herself. Some of the best blacksmiths were swordsmen. Ronin had been doing the motions right alongside them, as minor as they were. The difference was he looked fine, but as could be expected from someone who did this every day. She had outlasted Kaminari at least. They learned what swords needed and added it to their creations, making other swordsmen want them more. He drew his sword in a single fluid motion, slicing through the air despite the practiced sword's dull edge. In his hands, it looked like a real weapon. He inspected the blade closely, despite his great performance. Like how to balance a sword. I might have to break whatever the hell they're making in there. Anything else for drawing a sword? She looked up at him and picked up her sword. Wasn't exactly her thing, but the learning was fun. It was like they said, couldn't paint the beach without seeing the ocean. Yeah, follow along now. You want to lead with the sword handle as you draw. Kaminari held the finished sword in his hands. Still didn't have a handle, but it looked so cool. He swung it around, not caring how he looked. The door was walked on as the other came back in. He got to mess around for another minute before Ronin approached. Power loader, how'd it go? Fine, no big problems. You really wanted it to be iron though. Seems kind of weak. Kaminari didn't quite care as they talked, delighted to have something vaguely sword-like. Nope, this was practice. Didn't want to ruin any of your steel on his first sword. I'll help him, you help the girl with the guns. He pointed over his shoulder. Quote. The girl with the WHO gave you guns. Don't hit it with a hammer. Power loader left to help with the gun and motor sheaths. Quote. We're making a different one too. Ronin nodded, taking the first one. This one will be for practice, like if you need to try a new move that might damage your sword. The balance is a little off, but we can work with it. For now, get those stones and go back to that furnace, we have some metal to cook. Ronin and Power Loader were very different when it came to making a sword. Power Loader was all about preset times and math, while Ronin seemed to eyeball it. He didn't explain himself much, since Kaminari wouldn't get what he was talking about. They moved much faster, with the entire blade being lengthened out in 20 minutes. Ronin even told him how to add the curved shape to it, checking it with his eyes. He'd have Kaminari hold the blade up and make sure it was straight regularly, then continue the forging. They slowed down when they hit the grinding stage, sawing off excess material. This sword had something resembling an edge but was entirely smooth, and entirely done without Ronin touching the blade once in under 45 minutes. What do you think of your work? Ronin adjusted a new, different chemical bath, made of different stuff than the one Power Loader used. He checked the area for something while Kaminari held the sword up. This one was lighter than the last one, and a little bit shorter too. It seemed a little thinner as well, and he was pretty sure they sanded for longer compared to the other sword. I like it. Ronin had been right, making something yourself made it all the better. He prepared it for the heat treat, when you shoved it in the fire before you shoved it into the chemicals but was stopped. Ronin took the sword for him and elaborated. One last step before we go and do the chemical treating. Ronin set it on the ground and cleared the surroundings, then gave Kaminari a weird stick and protective goggles. I'm going to stand over there. When I give you a thumbs up, use your quirk as hard and as you safely can. Got it. Kaminari nodded, and Ronin retreated. You're going to run your quirk along the blade from the handle to almost the tip. Almost the tip. Then you flip it and run it from the handle to almost the tip on the other side. Not the tip, almost the tip. Kaminari nodded as Ronin turned his back, then gave him a thumbs up. Kaminari didn't know what was supposed to happen, so he poured power into the stick, dragging it along the blade. From handle to the tip no. He stopped at almost the tip, kicking it over to the other side with his shoe and restarting. He didn't even have time to look at his own work through the heavily shaded goggles until it was all said and done. Did it work? He had put some weird burn scar thing on his sword with the lightning. There was a weird scar running down the body of the blade now where his electricity had torched and warped the metal, forming a strange burn groove in the weapon. Ronin stopped him from touching it directly and instead handed him the tongs. Put it in the furnace to let the metal relax, then we'll clean it up on the grinder again. Ronin seemed relaxed, but Kaminari didn't have a clue what was happening. He followed along, putting it in and voicing his questions. Why'd you have me break it? It looked great. Ronin nodded. It didn't have bad balance either. Good shape, and if you were good enough, it would have had a great edge. When you get good enough, it will have a great edge. It should become hard enough to retain an edge for a long time. But, for you, we can do better. He checked the temperature of the sword, then had Kaminari bring it out. Give it a once over with the hammer to ensure stability, then go clean it off again. Finish by drilling 2 holes in it, I'll show you where when we get there. Kaminari went back to the automatic hammer, doing a slow hammering on each part to make sure it stayed smooth, then let it cool, cleaning the entire thing off again at the grinding wheel. Ronin handed him a measuring stick, a permanent marker, and told him where to mark and drill. It returned back to the kiln for a moment, then went into the chemical bath to rest. Ronin checked something he'd been working on the entire time Kaminari had been forging, only stopping his work on it to give Kaminari tips. Now, he gave some of his usual strange old man wisdom. Do you know of kintsugi, Kaminari? Quote. Nope. He shrugged, used to not always getting it. Besides, he could tell there was an explanation coming if and when he didn't. Gold repair. When something was broken, they'd use a little lacquer and a little gold dust to put the pieces back together. It transforms damages and mistakes from something to hide into something to show off. He checked the substance in the rather large bowl. It was about the size of Kaminari's head. Haven't you wondered what we were going to do with all that gold we got? Quote. I'm gonna get a gold sword. Ronin laughed in his secret ninja insightful old man way. Not get Kaminari. You're going to make a gold sword. Give it another 30 to 40 minutes to sit, we have time. He laughed, gesturing out of the room toward the hall. This was the long part last time too. They watched out the window as the clouds rolled by, not speaking. One lost in the thoughts of the cool thing he just did, the other lost in the things he was going to do with this boy. Midoriya guided Kaminari through the last step, making sure it was still mostly smooth. The slightly rough part of the gold was part of the image, and was also kind of the point. It started at the handle and would ensure his electricity traveled the blade easily. He had to make sure it didn't compromise the integrity of the blade, but Kaminari had done a good job etching the blade. The handle would be copper wiring and gold bits. They worked on the Suba while they waited, giving the completed handguard and pommel a cover of the gold lacquer as well. The ornament, handle, and wrapping would have to be gold all the way through to ensure a good connection. You don't have to take your internship or apprenticeship with me, you know. Ronin sat beside Kaminari, who was copying his motions to create the ornament. Even the teachers here might be a better fit. No way, dude. Could you imagine taking your week with Aizawa? No sleep, no sunlight, and no breaks from him. He laughed as Power Loader stuck his head in. But you might also get Midnight. Wouldn't you prefer her instead of me? Kaminari laughed and nodded. Guilty as charged. He squinted, focusing on his work. This doesn't look like a thundercloud. But if I did take someone else, I wouldn't get the skills. She might be hot, you know, but your quirk isn't physical, and you still pull off some crazy shit. He worked the small hammer and pin, carving details into his cloud. I want to learn how you do that. You're like some hidden boss I accidentally discovered, and I'm a milk for all you're worth. He laughed as he worked, but slowly sobered up. Quote. My parents are heroes, you know. I was tempted to go with them. If I did, I'd get to spend the whole day with them instead of just half a day with you, and half a day at the school. I'm the only one who's going to do that, you know. But they're doing that cause they're my family. He leaned in, licking his lips with focus. I was a little worried that I couldn't keep up, you know. I'm the dumbest in my class, well, one of them. My quirk might be flashy, but it's hard to control. You probably saw or heard about it, but if I use it too much I fry my brain and get even dumber. I'm not very useful since I can't even control the direction of my shots when they get big. Quote. But you were willing to give me a minute and show me this cool attack. You didn't know me, you didn't have to, but you taught me it anyway. And even when I didn't use it, you still let me come back and learn it again. He gave a cheesy smile to Midoriya. I want to prove to you that you're not wasting your time. I want to prove to everyone I'm not some reckless kid. But, I think I want to prove to myself that I got what it takes. That I'm not a complete idiot, that I belong here. You know. Midoriya sat, staring at the counter for a while, then slowly patted Kaminari on the back. Quote. Hey, what are you doing? Don't make this awkward, dude. Midoriya chuckled. Listen up then. Since you chose to apprentice with me, I'll make sure you're the first student in your class to have a super move. During our week, I'll teach you how to use thunder breathing forms, but going forward, you'll make these moves your own. You know. What was that? An immediate callback. Alright, deal. The two shook hands, snickering a little. Then he looked over at what Kaminari was making. Quote. Why are you making a sheep? I knew it didn't look like a cloud. In the end, Ronin made one of the ornaments as a gift to him. The second one took even longer but slowly took shape. Ronin then did minor touch-ups, to make sure it didn't break or something. He removed the sword, checking it over and nodding. You've done great, Kaminari. We're going to dry it off, then add the kintsugi. They cleaned it off with cloths, amazing him with the pattern in the metal. Strange dark lines like lightning ran through the blade. The scarred metal was still warm to the touch. It had a weird design, with such a dark metal. Ronin placed down the bowl he'd been mixing, showing a strange gold substance. He took out a wooden spoon and spread it along the blade with Kaminari. They covered the scars with the lacquer, Kaminari doing most of the body while Ronin did the small trails that branched from the main body. He then smoothed it out again. They flipped and repeated, but he didn't get to look at the finished product. Alright, this needs to dry, so we'll leave it alone and test out those sheaths. Ronin balanced the sword on a stand he prepared, then shooed Kaminari outside. Come, this should be the last of the setup for us. Kaminari needed to relearn how to draw the sword, but after finishing what they already went over and adding more he practiced drawing swords. Midoriya sat back by the two crafters, checking the weight and balance of their creations. If it was too heavy, it couldn't be moved properly and would slow down the swordsman. Too unbalanced and it would throw the swordsman off. However, both of those needed to happen majorly to affect the swordsman. Quote. So, you, heard about UA's apprenticeships? A strange question from Power Loader. Depends, will you sign my notes finally? He offered them without any shame at how cheesy he was. Power Loader forced himself to take it, muttering about how dumb this was. Hasn't everyone? Just study UA's past years, and the trend suggests it's happening soon. If I hadn't been offered to apprentice Kaminari though, I wouldn't know it was next week though. You are the one he signed up for. Ronin stopped staring at his apprentice failing to draw a sword because he forgot to hit the release button and face the pro hero instead. Quote. Nezu didn't tell you. He's the one who offered it to me. It was strange that a principal wouldn't tell his workers what he was doing. On minor things it made sense, but a student shadowing a vigilante wasn't minor. There were safety and legality things to worry about, and someone would probably be following him to ensure he didn't do anything illegal. I'm going to have to bring this up at the next meet shit. The last one was this morning. That meant by the next time all the teachers met and were told of what Nezu had done, the week would be over. Also, Power Loader was one of the only teachers who definitely couldn't follow him. He was too obvious and he had all 3 years of his classes to teach. Do you want me to walk in front of a camera, or go see who's still in the building? Midoriya refocused on his student. If you want me to join you, we can get lunch for these kids while we're out shit. Kaminari, do not spin the gun sheath. Quote. You are the real Ronin, aren't you? He got a weird look for that. You're just, not how I imagined you. Whatever, just go find Present Mike. He probably has all the other teachers' numbers. From everything he knew, Present Mike was the easiest person to get a hold of, and he definitely seemed like the kind of guy who'd do anything to get everyone's numbers. Quote. Present Mike, are you still in the building? Yeah, could you get as many of the teachers here as possible? Definitely Aizawa. See ya in 10. He hung up. Could have asked him to pick up lunch, I'd pay him back. Hatsume, why are you messing with the sheets now? I'm trying to get a feel for it so I can make a better sheet, sir. She clicked the button and launched the sword out like a bullet. Quote. Well, the bullet propulsion works great, sir. Midoriya took it, looking it over. It had the trigger at the mouth of the sheath, so you could still push it out with your thumb. Quote. Have you considered combining anything? The spring seemed to go well with everything, but lacked pushing power on its own. Hatsume brought back the sword, holding it like a hammer and swinging it idly around, nearly hitting him twice. If I put in enough springs to do it on its own, sheathing becomes too difficult. He nodded, then grabbed her hand to stop her from cutting him. He took the sword and spun it into a reverse grip and brought the tip to his shoulder, pushing the blade away from the mouth of the saya but moving along the blade, until the tip was over the saya's mouth. Then the handle went up and into the saya until closed. One streamlined motion, only about a second because he slowed down towards the end. He put the blade underneath his cloak and into his belt over top Yamato, fastening it. The ammunition gets in the way of the wrapping. Try to make them work with each other instead of against, like turning the ammo spot into a place to fasten the belt at. He showed off what he was talking about, but she only had eyes for something else. That's your sword. Why does it have buttons? What's it do? What did you make it out of? Focus. We're talking about your design, not mine. He checked the clip, then reinserted it. He took his stance, wrapping his fingers around the saya. His index flicked the trigger idly as he breathed, adjusting his stance, rushing the target. As he entered range, the trigger clicked. Hatsume was pretty sure the swords were blunt, which is why it didn't make sense when the training dummy was split in half. His explosive opening to finish showed off why Ronin wasn't scared of tangling with pros. For someone who called himself a vigilante, he'd be awfully good at killing. The top of the dummy floated up for another second, then was caught by gravity and crashed to the ground. It popped and sparked, creating a shadow against the vigilante. He faced the fire, back to her, and spun the sword a few times as he looked at his handiwork, then held up the sword. It was missing half its length, and even what was left was damaged. Quote. It seems this method is quite effective. We need to correct this method if used. He sheathed what was left and locked it in place. An additional trigger, so you can remove the sword without firing it. Perhaps it'd be better to be an alternate trigger. Hatsume, check the internals. We don't want the sword or sheath exploding from damages. He tossed the entire piece to her and began to look around, then returned to the workshop with the other piece of the sword. It's quite effective, but these practice swords can't handle the impact. They're too dull. Two rocks met, and it was only a test of hardness. Quote. So we need to make sure the sword has enough edge to cut things for the practice tests. Ronin nodded and began to help her, removing the ammunition clip and beginning to unscrew the modified sheath to look at the internals. This will need to be easier to remove. When dealing with gunpowder, you need to clean regularly. Ronin tore apart her baby, but it would all help the next baby be even better. Heroes had manners, but it seemed all Ronin had was facts. So how did you handle it? Kaminari had shot the sword out like a gun 3 times before giving up on drawing it entirely. He didn't have a good enough grip or technique to draw it, it was so powerful. Quote. It's good enough. Ronin didn't get overwhelmed by it though and turned that explosive force into his slice. A spring would help the release in tension though, even if it would make sheathing more difficult. Make sure the shell ejection goes away from the body, possibly down and away. Otherwise, it might hit and burn the user's own arm. Ronin adopted to her blueprints, sketching quickly. He wasn't great, but it was obvious he was no rookie. The two went back and forth on the new sheath for him, before settling for their new combined method. So you gonna get a new thing too? Kaminari was trying out the adjusted sheath for him. He had decided on the motorized sheath that ejected his sword with a wheel since he could change the speed as he got better and better. It had been modified so that the battery was him, if he remembered to put his hand in the right place. I suppose I am. Ronin took a moment to glance at Hatsume, who was creating a new sheath for one of the practice swords. Enough of me though, how's yours? Great, Kaminari demonstrated, grabbing the sword and pulling it out without activating it. Power Loader told me I did enough work on the sword to definitely use it next sports festival, but I might need a little more practice making this thing before I can bring it to. Ronin nodded, impressed. It was 4 p.m. now, and they were standing in the training room. Sunlight shone through the windows illuminating the space, and they had enough room to do some cuts. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything in here they could practice their movements on. We'll begin training soon, but first I'm going to get dinner for all of us. Hatsume put in a lot of work, and I have some money to burn. I won't do this every day though, so next week you'll need to come after lunch. Ronin checked his phone, skimming through places. Quote. Do you think Lunch Rush is still here? That'd be cheap. No way dude, it's the weekend. Why would he be here? Lunch Rush, Eraserhead, Present Mike, Midnight, Recovery Girl, and Power Loader all met in the hall. Quote. Where's All Might? I thought you said he was here. Power Loader really wanted All Might when he started, just as backup. Now, he wasn't too sure. He's here for the same reason as us. Paperwork. He's still going, he'll be here soon. Eraserhead yawned. Why'd you call us? I was gonna skip this if you hadn't asked for me. Quote. Aizawa, have you gotten to check where everyone's taking their internships? He knew this was going somewhere, but Aizawa couldn't figure out where. Quote. A few. Bakugo is going to Best Genus to prove he's learned nothing. Yaoyarozu is going under Iwambi, against my better judgment. I don't see why this interests you. Denki Kaminari is going to be interning under Ronin. Midnight, who'd been barely awake, snapped up, chugged what was left of her coffee, then began screaming at him. He's what? Who let him intern under that creep? Why when I see him? Present Mike reined her in. Whoa. Nimuri, don't you Nimuri Miyazashi. You didn't spend 6 months chasing him around like a fucking monkey. She stomped as she spoke, snarling with rage. Where's my whip? Oh, who cares? I'll kill that emo ass clown without it. So I'm going to guess you didn't know he was interning under Ronin. Power Loader and Aizawa stepped away from the screaming Midnight, who was just a second from using her quirk to knock out Present Mike. No, but I think Nezu hinted at it. Aizawa rubbed his eyes, trying to remember the strange comments Nezu had made. No doubt he approved it, in a meeting or something. Nezu knew where that fuckface was this whole time. I'll kill him too. Let me go Present Mike or you're also going on the list. Do you know how much sleep I lost chasing him? Huh, Midnight looked like she was going to skip quirks and try to strangle Ronin to death. Quote. I'm not really needed here, am I? Well, I don't think I am either. Are you still taking food requests? I'm only paying for 3 kids, the rest of you can get your own food. Lunch Rush shook his head. Sorry, no can do. We just finished closing up and making sure we'll have everything prepared for Monday. Lot less students, you know. Ronin nodded his head, stroking his mask where his chin should be. I see, thanks anyway. He went back into the support room to pass along the message before the hero's head uniformly snapped toward him. Quote. Huh. Chapter and notes. Another long one, but this one actually went over a few baby things. Also, yo. We briefly mention a spear technique that Ronin might start the next chapter off having to use. It's not used very often, but slicing with a spear can be pretty powerful if you get the leverage. It's not effective in all directions, but physically possible in almost any one. Crafting the swords. We've been over crafting weapons a lot. From easy weapons like the needles to complicated messes like Yamato, this starts out about the level of the spear but jumps to the level of the kanabo when you add in the kintsugi. Kintsugi is the process of fixing broken pottery with lacquer that has gold dust in it and generally looks pretty good. I can't go too much into the mechanics for the sheaths, because I don't understand them enough to know if they'd work or not. I can study as much as I want, I'm just not smart enough to get some of this stuff. I'm positive any strike that could send a metal sword through a robot made of the same stuff would break the sword, and that this stuff is pretty dangerous, but I'm mostly just yoinking from books, mangas, and animes. Ronin's sheath is a direct rip-off of the second inspiration for him and has been the other piece that was planned from the beginning of the story. I couldn't find any videos of the sword I'm referencing but not saying the name of. A model of it does exist, but it has the wrong saya, which was the coolest part of the sword for me. If you know where I can find someone scientifically explaining a sheath that literally shoots your sword out, please post about it. I'm just going of guesswork and theory right now. Glad to put in more Hatsume, and Midnight's new hatred of all things Ronin. Hope you have a Gucci good day, and also, yo. Chapter 53, Chapter 53. Chapter Summary. A hero begins to learn his craft, and the rather lame arrival of the pro-heroes. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya walked back into the room. Thanks for pointing out the hero's Hatsume, but they're not serving food anymore. Oh well, she laughed it off, then held up the completed sheath. This baby's ready at least, come give it a shot. Midoriya nodded and took it, checking the weight right as the adults burst on the scene. With their state of disarray, it was impossible to call them heroes. Midnight was snarling, dragging Present Mike and Lunch Rush along with her step by step. Let go, I'll kill him right here. So I'm thinking fast food, is that good with you? Hatsume nodded, and Midoriya thought of nearby restaurants. He could get some food for the three of them. What do you want? Fries should be good. Large free as 2 orders. I need something I can eat quickly and won't get in the way. He nodded and ducked into the next room, ignoring the screaming woman behind him. You just keep on running, Ronin. I swear when I get my hands on you. Kaminari, I'm going to pick up fast food for us. What do you want? Keep it generic and under 1,000 yen, please. Kaminari stopped swinging the sword around like a child and thought. Quote. Another Gatorade, and a cheeseburger. Wait, can you get some curly fries with that? Please, I'll pay for the curly fries. Midoriya nodded and took the kid's money, turning. Oh hey, why is Midnight shouting? Something wrong? Not entirely sure. Must be that time of the month. Try not to give her too many troubles. Kaminari was still thinking his words as he left the practice room, shutting the door behind himself. Oh, I get it. Ronin re-entered the room calmly, sidestepping Midnight who finally broke free. She was swinging her fists around, too enraged for rational thought. Just let me hit you. I'll be back with food. Later. He walked out, waving goodbye with his left. Just for a brief moment, Hatsume could see that baby on his hip. It wasn't her baby, but it seemed well developed. Most people didn't put a lot of effort into their materials, but Ronin seemed to thoroughly develop everything from his pieces on up. The handle she had briefly seen had intricate designs covered by the grip, and strange levers near the handle. Above all, a big button that begged to be pressed. Her hands twitched. She wanted to know what it did, and how it did it. The problem was Ronin wasn't even bothered fighting people way stronger than her. She'd have to use her head if she wanted to look at it. That bitch. Midnight stomped, fuming. I think you need to calm down, and that you're focusing on the wrong thing. Power Loader scratched his head at the pro-hero who could best be described as throwing a tantrum. Quote. Aren't we here to talk about Kaminari apprenticing with Ronin? Aizawa scratched his head. Nezu approved, and he probably has something planned. We can even ask Ronin what he plans to do when he gets back. When he gets back, I'm going to make him hurt as much as my back did. I had to sit on those roofs for hours. Midnight was trying to make a big deal of it, but no one else had the energy. Probably because Ronin walked around as if he belonged here. Hatsume was hoping she'd get to see him change sheaths so she could examine the sword. When Ronin swapped for the newer model, he'd have to take out his sword and attach a new one to his hip, and then she'd get to examine his sword. She smiled and hummed, drawing Midnight's attention. Midnight slowly realized there were other people there and reorganized herself, but Hatsume was going back to work. What did she care about how the pros carried themselves? She had a lot of requests from pros for her work since the sports festival. The heroes talked and talked, but she didn't care. Midnight seemed crushed by the others, scolding her for jumping instead of reasoning. None of them seemed to notice Ronin's return, slipping past all of them to give Hatsume her fries. She nodded in appreciation as he moved past her, going over to the testing room and Kaminari. How am I doing? Kaminari caught the burger, checking it before digging in. Overall, horribly. For how long you've been doing this? Pretty well. He set up a chair for Kaminari. Sit down while you eat, and watch me. This is what you'll be doing later. Midoriya ditched his cloak, showing off his muscles and scars as he stretched. You should stretch before doing a workout, and we're going to be pushing our limbs pretty far. You might pull something if you don't. He could have used the new sheath, now on his hip, but this was just the basics. He turned to present his left side to Kaminari, and slowly placed his hand, verballing going over the action so Kaminari could see and hear what he was doing. Midoriya breathed in, focusing on an image of his opponent. The hardest fight he ever had, the greatest disparity between himself and an opponent he ever felt. Those flowing red ribbons, that crazy hair, he could still remember it all, like the roofing against his fingers as he lay limply atop that building or the twinge of pain before his entire body froze up. He still had the scar on his fingers from the smallest cut that defeated him, not even stretching across 3 of his fingers. Ronin breathed out. For a moment, for just half a second, serenity and violence were balanced. His calm focus was mixed with passionate hatred and drive. Legs tensed, the body leaned, his breath hissed, and then he drove with all the speed he could muster for a single attack. Hatsume hadn't seen a real attack. He'd just been holding a sword and swinging, like that night. He had thrown needles, but he never struck. This was a mix of concentration and killing intent. This wasn't a sword swing, it was a cut. The attack was designed to build up speed and power from the legs. The forward momentum drove the human bullet forward. The following steps forced him to go faster and faster until he peaked, then pushed him onward as he put all that momentum into a single cut. His thumb pushed out the sword while the rest of his left hand pulled the entire saya back so he could draw even faster. The saya twisted as he drew, lining up his gut. He pushed the sword out, then pulled it across his body. Shoulder blades came together, arms tensed, and his wrist flicked out his sword as he cleaved the air. This swing would impart most of his momentum into the opponent and go straight through, meaning it could be repeated. Swing tilde. The cut was so heavy it hurt both his arm and shoulder with how far it pulled. Midoriya rolled his shoulder and shook the stiffness out of his arm, noting that apparently he was more right about stretching than he thought. Kaminari heard his teacher teleport across the room and felt the swing. It was a soft breeze, but for something not using a quirk that was amazing. Ronin sheathed the sword, giving him the once-over. Quote. Please close your mouth, Kaminari. You still have food in there. He quickly scarfed down the rest of his food, drowning it all with Gatorade and standing up. How long before I can do that? Ronin reached for his cloak. Right now, he showed off his arms, toned like steel. He looked like he could give Kirishima a run for his money. And all those scars just made him look even cooler. How long are you willing to train? How much training did this guy do? He looked like a veteran who fought for years in constant warfare. Kaminari didn't have to go to a war zone to get this good, did he? Quote. Until I succeed. That made Ronin laugh. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but for now let's practice stance while you digest your dinner. Get your sword, we've got drills to run. Kaminari drank the last of his Gatorade and took the chair out, wondering briefly what the pros were arguing about. Whatever, didn't concern him. He went back in and shut the door, picking up his sword and running beside his new master. It was just minor adjustments. They spent an hour not even dashing, just adjusting the starting posture and going over how to properly draw the sword. It was like slowly hammering metal to shape. Good. Try to draw the sheath back a little further, it can't go too far right now. We're just trying to get your sword out. Midoriya was beside him every step of the way, slowly polishing off what Kaminari learned. Don't worry about getting it right on the first try. Don't worry about the 10th time. Don't even worry at the 1,000th. The only time to worry is when it matters. When does it matter then? The only time you'll wish it was right. When a life's on the line. Excellent shoulder movement. You're drawing in a great direction, wouldn't want to accidentally go to cut and hit your own leg, would we? Kaminari ditched his coat as they worked, and his sword speed steadily improved until peaking, and now was on a decline as he was too tired. Midoriya put a hand on his shoulder. Great hustle, Kaminari. We'll go over the next part sitting down, and you can have the displeasure of trying to mix this on your own for now. Tomorrow is my day off, and I will not be with you. Kaminari nodded, glad for the break, and got to lay on the floor while Midoriya talked him through a basic meditation. It was a strange change of pace but allowed him to relax his muscles and breath. It wasn't advanced and was just to calm down the heart rate and get rid of some stress. He sat in the lotus position, because he spent 10 minutes each week learning to do it, and by God, he was going to do it now. He talked to Kaminari, instructing him when to breathe in and out in a calm tone. Speaking of which, they only went for 10 minutes. Well, they together only went for 10 minutes. Midoriya had looked up a video to put on while he got them more water and bailed, letting Kaminari follow along with the program. He walked out and still rolled his right shoulder. He could feel the tension from that swing, but was unsure how he did it himself. The muscles hurt like when he started working a new position, like his spear chops. He rubbed his shoulder, then walked forward. MH, are you even listening? When did she get there? Midnight was in front of him, talking his ear off. He stood placidly, looking up at her and feeling short as fuck. I Nimari. We agreed that wasn't what we were here for. Present Mike spoke up, giving Midoriya some new information on the heroine before him. He'd add it to his notes later. Nimari isn't any better. Midnight still backed down, snarling at him. Quote. I'm missing a major part of this conversation, and I think it's almost all of it. More than that, I don't think I want to know. Midoriya started to walk past them. Power loader, do you have drinking fountains in here or something? Hold it. Eraserhead was talking now. There were a lot of pro heroes here. Was it the right time to get some autographs? He needed present mics, lunch rushes, and power. No, he got power loaders earlier. We want to talk to you about the apprenticeship with Denki Kaminari you asked for. Agreed to. Kaminari asked for me specifically, not quite sure why. Midoriya now searched the room for somewhere he could fill the water bottles. If they weren't going to help him, he'd do it himself. Is that all? Just ask Nezu, he's your boss. I just want him to owe me a favor. Yeah. What do you actually intend to do with him? Eraserhead was in some weird sleeping bag, resting against the wall. He physically couldn't take the hero seriously and was glad the mask messed up his voice and hid his real face. Midnight spoke up, still peeved at something. He didn't know what and he cared even less than he knew. You don't know what most heroes do for their internships or apprenticeships, do you? Most heroes treat the students as sidekicks, placing them below themselves and giving them menial tasks and pointless patrols instead of as independent heroes, like most of them will become. He finally found a water fountain. Is this safe to drink? Hatsume, is this safe to? I'm going to take that as a yes. He focused on the sink, filling the 2 bottles. I won't be doing any vigilantism with him. I don't do it with vigilantes, and doing it with him would just be counterproductive. He doesn't have the instincts yet. He closed the bottles, spinning to look at them. Any other questions? I went for the easy ones I thought you might ask. You can ask Kaminari to keep his phone turned on so you can track him or give me someone else to babysit, but try to stay out of my way. The people who did this are volunteering. I'm not getting paid to do any of this. Yeah, how much time do you? Midnight was cut off, taking an empty juice packet to the side of the head. None right now. Are you just going to train him that move? Power loader nodded to a monitor, and while most of the others just saw a flickering image, Midoriya knew what he was talking about. To start with, yeah. Do you do first aid certification here? I might teach him that too if you don't. Midoriya pulled out his schedule, checking the things he planned to teach Kaminari. It was mostly just thunderclap and flash all the way, seeing if he could get the kid to put his quirk into the attack. That'd be where things went haywire. We have a course over it, but a little knowledge in advance wouldn't hurt. Oh, Recovery Girl was here. The perfect person to ask. You shouldn't push him too hard, sir. I know you might be quite spry and strong, but he's a growing young man. He's still developing. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed either. Eraserhead threw in his 2 bits. He tends to not focus, and if you set your goals too high probably won't meet your expectations. He was going to die. He was going to explode with laughter, and they'd kill him. They thought he wasn't young or spry. He'd been worried they were onto him, but these guys had not a single fucking clue who he was. He's already not meeting my expectations, he's exceeding them. I am strongly against you discouraging your students without seeing how far they can develop. Eraserhead's line did piss him off. Not everyone adjusts on a dime. Some people can learn quickly, jumping from thought to thought, while others need to learn slowly, building line on line. Having done way too much preaching for even his own tastes, he stood up, preparing to leave. I am. Coming through the knockdown door. Sorry I'm late, it seemed rude to interrupt such a passionate exclamation of one's students. No, he couldn't be here, he couldn't. All Might stood in his buff form, laughing. And I thought there was some emergency when you called for me, but it's just a teacher get-together. You could have said so, power loader. A pleasure, Midnight. Present Mike, Eraserhead, looking good. Youthful as ever, recovery girl. Didn't know you were still here, lunch rush, and Ronin wait. They looked at each other for a moment, before Midoriya scooted his way back toward the testing room. If that's all you wanted. Have a great day, goodbye. He shut the door behind himself, breathing heavily. He thought he was going to have a heart attack. What was All Might doing there? If he was in the building, he should have arrived an hour ago. What the fuck were you doing for an hour? Midnight was having none of this shit. She had papers to grade that weren't getting graded, not that it would actually take long, but she wanted to leave. Wasn't anyone taking this seriously? He gave up on his big form when it was clear no one cared. I had to do everyone's papers. You all left with a huge stack for the first years, and I had to sort it all out. You could see Midnight go from pissed to delighted in real-time seconds. You did all the paperwork. Why didn't you say so? Quote. You wanna correct her? Present Mike whispered to Eraserhead, who was on his 6th juice packet. And get her ranting again. She can be a pain in the ass all she likes, as long as I don't have to deal with it. Hey All Might, we're all done. Aizawa got out of his sleeping bag and left. He had some free time to enjoy next week, and he could and would probably catch the vigilante and their shared student at the beginning of the night. Quote. I just got here. All Might looked so lost. What was the point of coming here then? Did you see Ronin's reaction when All Might showed up? Present Mike asked, laughing. Looks like even Musudafu's #1 vigilante is scared of him. Quote. Judging by his reaction, he might have actually just been fanboying. Aizawa didn't really care about mentioning this, since it didn't change much. He already asked for Midnight's, Recover Girls, and my signatures. And he's asked for mine every time we've met. I wonder if he actually likes heroes. He then lunged toward Hatsume, grabbing some of the leftover guns. These aren't yours. Stop messing with them. Quote. He likes heroes. All Might squinted, confused. That seemed like something Nezu would have brought up. Nezu definitely would have tested that by asking him, the #1 hero, to give a signature. Why would a vigilante like heroes? Is that why he avoids fighting us? Who knows? The spot closes in an hour, so if I rush I can make a 30-minute appointment. Give him a kick for me. Midnight practically skipped out. Quote. Why wouldn't he become a hero? His appearance made no sense. He should be in his 30s at the earliest, and would have had plenty of time to become a hero. Maybe his quirk only recently got to this level, or he found out he could do it. Preet and Mike shrugged. I mean, how many people would try to use an energy quirk to teleport? He must have had a ton of energy saved up and done it on accident, and that's when he went for this vigilantism shtick. Quote. Still, that level of martial arts. Lunch Rush offered his 2 cents, despite being the most inexperienced in combat. It seems like something he'd have to train. Were there any significant things happening around the time of his first appearance? When was his first appearance? Quote. 6 months ago. Eraserhead thought over the events when he got assigned to Ronin. Quote. Longer. 9 months. When were we first assigned? The little Musudafu decapitation. That was his first case we know of. Quote. Why that? All Might, well, it was more accurate to call him Toshinori right now, whoever he was his hero senses were tingling. Taking down an entire gang is a first entrance. It's bold, but most people start smaller. Maybe some smaller crime that's related was done by him. Aizawa realized he made a major mistake and wasn't getting out of it. Not easily, anyway. Yeah, but the other crimes are so open-ended it's impossible. We don't even have a location. Aizawa had been ready to start falling asleep, but his eyes snapped open. They did have a location, and while it was known Ronin didn't use it anymore, he and Midnight had stumbled into Ronin's old hideout. He had a smithy all set up to make his goods, inside an abandoned office. That was a location, and they just had to check it with past crime records. An incident that would have inspired the trade-off. Hey, do you remember the little Musudafu decapitation incident? Which gang's turf was it on? Quote. I think Toxin Lovers. They took the fall for the whole thing and collapsed later. Most of their major people went down in some warehouse fight. I think there was an explosion quirk involved. Their leader, Mao, got out of jail when his criminal record was erased. He got shot at the incident, but he hasn't been seen since. Present Mike was just vomiting facts, but Aizawa was putting it together. Toxin Lovers had been chased down and stomped out by Ronin. The decapitation incident, the warehouse explosion incident of 2222, Mao being shot, all of it had been done by one vigilante. Why? To get their turf, or rather, to make sure no one had that turf. Homeless people were infamously bad with police and heroes, but when it came to Ronin, not a word came out of even the most chatty witness. They probably knew something, but it seemed he had done them a favor once, a big one. That favor seemed to be the takedown of Toxin Lovers. He could have done it for many reasons, but probably because they operated in the same turf. Ronin would have butted heads with them, then gone straight for the head. His goal was probably never to take down all the gangs like they thought. The little Musudafu decapitation that was getting too long, the LMD wasn't about taking down the heads of all the gangs, it was about shattering the Toxin Lovers. It was why Ronin now moved without focus against the gangs when he had once only chased Toxin Lovers. Aizawa tapped his foot, thinking it all through again. If they shared a turf, they were one of the only groups who could accurately keep tabs on him. His first hideout should also be within their turf, so they'd fight over that too. Quote. What's he talking about? Toshinori whispered to Present Mike. Not a clue, but I think it's important. They nodded at each other. Ronin probably got into dozen of never documented fights and a few public ones, so his real record could go further back. If we only had records to look at, we could better date when he started fighting. Toxin Lovers Mao was also believed to be chasing him in the Centipeder incident, meaning that Toxin Lovers probably has information on him. Aizawa rubbed his eyes, then went for his dropper. Ronin has a history with the toxin lovers, however deep or shallow it is. Mao is also noted in his reports of being extremely responsive but never answering the questions head on. He thought back to the report. It was so cheesy, it was easy to remember. I came here for gang fights and drugs. But instead found a samurai. Something like that, I think. A Ronin is just a samurai without a master, and Mao probably wouldn't know the difference. It didn't really help, but these thoughts could be investigated. Ronin came about then probably because of something toxin lovers did, like a crime they did at the time. If we can find their first clash, we can find out where it all started. I'll post a record and have the police start looking through it. Thanks. He now left to file a request, the two not quite understanding what Aizawa had been talking about but knowing it vaguely concerned Ronin, toxin lovers, and the little Musudafu decapitation incident. Quote. Shouldn't we just arrest him? He is a vigilante. Toshinori scratched his head. We could, but it might violate whatever deal he has going with Principal Nezu and whatever crimes we charge him with will be cleared. Present Mike was more used to his dealings with vigilantes, but this was a lot of dealings with one vigilante. Why'd you stop? You had been doing so good. Ronin looked at him, head slightly tilted. Quote. Dunno, just a feeling, you know. He laughed it off, but Ronin shook his head. Don't laugh off your instincts, Kaminari. They've kept you alive so far. They might keep you alive a little longer if you listen to them. How did he do that? Where was he getting all this wisdom from? Did old men have to go to school to learn to be this smart, or was it only the mysterious martial arts masters? Quote. Just thinking that something's, I dunno, being completed, coming together. Ronin nodded. Let's hope whatever's coming together is good. Maybe if you train hard enough, it'll be your form that's coming together. Ronin packed up the little he brought, bowing. I'll come meet you at the gate. I'll be outside probably. See you Monday. They parted, Ronin taking the sword to finish it off. As Kaminari watched him walk off dramatically, he couldn't help but wonder what his instincts were telling him now. As he watched Ronin spin around the training room, his instincts told him this was impressive and powerful but also dangerous. Ronin might not have called himself impressive, but he already told Kaminari that these techniques could be powerful but dangerous if used wrong. He wandered home, thinking over what his instinct had told him. All he could think of was to keep drilling, to sharpen his skills. 1,000 reps. 1,000,000. He was an idiot and a gamer. He did mindless shit like that all the time. Grinding it out was nothing to a pro like him. Chapter end notes. Yeet. This was a lot harder to write than it should have been. I even wrote and posted the start to a new fanfic before writing it. It's not much right now, but my other fanfic is going to be a combination of JJBA and BNHA. The first chapter's up, go tell me how much of a garbage idea it is and how sexist I am over there. So, this fanfic. Stop shameless self-plugging. Its name is Izuku's Boku no Hero Adventure. Violence is unbeatable, a play on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure swapping at the B to BNHA and reverting at the A. That's it, I'm done for real. Midnight is a lot less cranky in canon, but I'm giving her a grudge because it's a better dynamic in my opinion. We might get flirty down the road. Nezu doesn't keep an open relationship with his employees in my opinion because he's trying to teach them to think for themselves. You never stop learning, and Nezu doesn't just view Ronin as a time bomb he needs to defuse, but also a learning experience that hero society can learn from if they put in the effort. We see someone starting to do that in this chapter. We're gonna start seeing some actual training. I don't mean to push or pry, but as of Saturday in this fanfic in the canon, Stain should have had a meeting with some weirdos in a bar, and the apprenticeships are starting soon. Wonder what will happen. Chapter 54. Chapter summary. Midoriya has sauntered in and out of UA with his apprentice, now both armed with their own quick-draw sheaths. Midoriya now moves on to Sunday, to spend time with his mom and hone his own skills. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya spent Sunday finding out that he got his lack of coordination from his father after getting schooled in ping pong. He didn't even know if his mom had ever heard of ping pong before, but here they were, with her giving him tips on how to properly hit the ball. After a long day that worked his shoulder and arm, he returned to training his own thunderclap and flash. He never expected to be so good at it. He drilled each step, focusing now on not improving his push-off but the second step. A good start was nothing if it wasn't used. The second step had to take the energy he built and help bridge it with the other steps. The third step was like the second, and the fourth like the third. Every step branched from the last, so every step he refined helped refine the next. Ducking and dodging, using minor movements to adjust his overall velocity. In the anime he ripped it off from, you didn't use the arms at all to build up speed. However, he found that by waiting until the second to last step to grab the sword, you could build up a small bit of extra momentum. He'd get up to top speed, then fling his right arm across his body to pull himself forward and twist, winding up for the attack. It made his opening quieter, but his finish more explosive. His second step improved, from dragging him along to a second chance to push off. The first step was to get him moving, the second was to give him speed. He danced around the beach, letting it work his ankles. Sand flew, and his swings created a second breeze. He didn't have surroundings, it was just him and his sword. He'd woken up early to create his new sheath. He had noticed that 6 of his guns disappeared, but he had over 50 handguns alone. What was 6 missing, but the work of a week? Instead, he rebuilt a new sheath from metal that could take the blast. He had transformed a gun into his new method of quick draw, however little he'd use it. His main thoughts were on himself, namely on his shoulder and that slash he performed yesterday that had hurt his arm. It wasn't bad, he could barely feel it anymore, but he wanted to do it again. And again, until he could use it as easily as he breathed. He resheathed the practice sword into the prototype explosion sheath, then prepared his body. He entered that calm sea he tried to stay in so much, focusing on what he felt. He'd been trying to show Kaminari something, but he forgot what metaphor used. Hey civilian, this beach might be empty but you're not supposed to use your quirk here. Midoriya stopped mid-slash, stumbling a little and looking up at. Quote. Death arms. He was losing sight of that tranquil ocean. This jackass was the one who only gave a damn about his fucking reputation. Calling him a civilian. What the fuck did he think he was, a government worker? What are you yelling about? Another person to piss him off, MT. Lady. Oh great, just some dude inspired by. Ronin. Did they think he couldn't hear them? He was wearing a mask, but it was pretty obvious who he was. Who the fuck else ran around with a katana in Musudafu? Hey, you want to learn to fight, go to dojo or something, but stop flailing around in public. Nobody fucking came here. Better yet, nobody fucking cared. There, we can leave now, right? Death Arms argued with MT. Lady while Midoriya massaged his right shoulder, then checked his form. Other than his shouldering hurting and throwing him off, he was doing great. A few thousand more reps and he might have his second step down. Not perfected, but able to pull it off better. He didn't even bother with the sword draw, just dashing while doing the motions away from the two bickering heroes. The legs lined up, he leaned forward, then twisted his legs outward just a tad before exploding off. His right leg extended fully while his left knee came up, rising above his hip before hammering down. He had to angle it to push him straight forward, since the initial push-off with his right leg wouldn't push him straight forward. The third step corrected his momentum again but with a smaller and tighter focus. By the fifth step, he was going straight forward as far as he could tell. He'd need more practice before he could find true straight. He would reach his top speed by the seventh step, so on the sixth, he swung his arm to get that extra momentum. It crossed his body and turned him slightly, angling him so his last right step could give as much power as possible. The final step pushed him forward while his arm exploded outward, completing the slash. The rotation still made his arm ache a little, but he could put up with it. He shook his arm, then did it again. And again. And again. He hit the trash that was strewn across the beach and danced over them like stepping stones. There were a few slowing steps after the hit, since transferring all his momentum and stopping dead would probably give him a concussion. The trash heap served as great practice for his legs. By the time he looked back, the duo hadn't even noticed his absence. He shook his head, then lined up his feet again. You know, you really should stop. Somebody else was in the trash with him. He broke posture to look at whoever was talking. Kamui Wood squatted on another trash pile, pointing at him. Public quirk use is qualified as vigilantism, and is a serious crime. Quote. You think this is my quirk? Did these idiots only think you could run if your quirk gave you super legs? These weren't even impressive speeds. If he was on flat ground, he could give them a real show. If you're just going to interrupt my training, piss off. I've got work to do. He either hated Kamui the most or the least for admonishing that fucker, Bichugo, and he wasn't honestly sure which. Any hero who thought that sociopath could be a hero wasn't a hero, but an idiot. Ronin retook his stance, breathed out, and dashed. Instead of his usual 7 steps, he broke it down into 6 steps but performed it 3 times back to back. He didn't even need to swing his arm if he used the 6th kick off his positioning. This miniature version could be launched with great speed, but still required him to eventually take a break. Ronin stretched his legs when he stopped, pulling his legs as high as they could go. If he turned his slowing steps into another thunderclap and flash, he could hypothetically repeat the attack indefinitely, but his stamina wasn't indefinite. He finished stretching and lined up for another attack, going to try the miniature version again. Quote. If this was my quirk, doesn't that mean you have a speed quirk too to keep up? He could hear Kamui Woods behind him, probably going for one last lecture before he attacked. You were running away from an authority fig, hey. Sorry. Quote. Excuse me. You just called yourself an authority figure. Ronin sized this guy up. Half a second, that'd be all it took to kill him. 2 slashes, one to break his guard and the next to cut through most of his head. I wasn't aware heroes learned any laws other than the hero ones. If you wanna fight me, you'd be an authority figure. Arrest me. You ain't an authority on shit when it comes to arresting people. Quote. Now, if you're done preaching, piss off. I need to train. Ronin adjusted his posture which had begun to fall apart, then rocketed away. He used every bit of trash as a starting block, kicking off to get as much forward momentum as possible. Every swing to maximize his own momentum and push himself forward. His intense emotions allowed him to push past his limits. 3 thunderclaps. Why stop? He could go further. He had to. Would Stain wait for him to catch his breath? Every kick refocused, and Ronin seemed to blink from place to place, ending his 9th dash with a slash so powerful it spun him around like a top. All forward momentum was turned sideways, creating a much more powerful slash. He looked down the length of his sword as he breathed. How much further could he go? How far could this passion take him? Quote. If you want to fight me, just say so. You're getting further and further from your team. Ditching your hero team was never good. They should at least have stayed within a mile of each other. Ronin rubbed his legs, then took out his notes and began to write. Quote. I think I might, if you are who I think you are. I think most people wanted to at least try to fight you, Ronin. Then they're idiots. What's the point in fighting me right now? You can't arrest me on suspicion alone, and I don't gain anything. Save your energy for saving people, like heroes are supposed to. This guy really was a pain in the ass. 9 slashes. Fuck 9 slashes. What kind of storm only had 9 thunderbolts? I wonder, how many I can really do? Then I guess I'm an idiot. With that simple declaration, Kamui's arm came up. The wide-range attack should have been able to beat his widespread movement. It moved everywhere slower than him but cut off his options. Ronin spun on his heel, facing his opponent and stretching his right arm. He was about to do a lot of weed cutting, after all. Wouldn't want to hurt something. Quote. Thunder breathing. First form. Lacquered chain prison. Thunderclap and flash. Hey Sensei Ronin. Both men slowly turned toward him. He was so glad he got to see this. Hey, saw you. Gimme a sec. We're putting in practice too. Kaminari stretched his back, then stood back up. You two practicing your moves. That's pretty cool. Dude wait, you're Kamui Woods. You know the sensei. Was Ronin that famous? For a security guard at UA and a hero not even on the ranking board, he was pretty famous. With moves like his though, it made sense. Ooh, I get it. You getting some training in with the sensei. Might if I join? Kamui was trying to talk, but Ronin just nodded. Quote. It's fine. Did you bring your sword? Kaminari broke into a smile, then grabbed for his sword. Then kept grabbing. Quote. Gimme a. Ronin removed his belt and tossed it to him. Use that. If you don't know how to draw it without firing it, ask. I'll go and get yours. Ronin left, going back the way he had been but now going away from the beach. He probably left his stuff up there. Quote. Dude, isn't he the coolest? Kamui looked at him like he was from Mars. Quote. You're Ronin's disciple. Oh, shit, I forgot to introduce myself. Oh shit, I'm swearing in front of the number 11 hero. Fuck, my name is Kaminari. I'm a student at UA and apprenticing under him for the week. Class 1A, glad to meet you. Kaminari bowed several times, then dropped the belt and sheath entirely. Shit, give me a second, I need to do this. Kamui watched in utter confusion as a student in a hero course for the third largest but second most promising hero school in the world, who was apprenticed to some random vigilante from Musudafu who the Hero Bureau released info on to try and catch, tried and failed to put a belt on. Shit. Fuck. Fucking shit. Fuck. Can you hold this sword? The unnamed student handed him the sword, then went about adjusting the belt until it looked right. Yeah, thanks. Kamui tried to unsheath it, but something was stopping it from opening. Quote. How do you know, Ronin? It seemed like they might know each other and the kid was just lying to cover so they could both make an escape, but then what was the point of the kid staying around? Oh, Ronin. I asked him to teach me his sword moves, so he accepted me as an apprentice. I didn't know teachers could do the internship thing, but Ronin took time out of his schedule to do it. Quote. Ronin's a teacher at UA. What? Well, I think he's a security guard or something. Kaminari shrugged it off, then finished tying his sword in place. Ronin was actually coming back, true to his word. I don't cry. Are you going to keep following me? Now I've got even more work to do. Ronin's attitude toward Kamui and this kid was completely different. He hadn't looked too closely at Ronin but had been following his movements. A tank top that showed off scars and burns. Baggy loose pants and athletic shoes. A cloth mask covered his face. But at his side was a strange sword, long and ornate. It had a strange mechanism on the sheath he was pretty sure most katanas didn't. You done your stretches? Then let's start right now. They went to the sand and stretched, focusing mostly on their legs. Aye Kamui, you gonna join us? Come on Tilda. He didn't need to see his eyes to know Ronin was glaring daggers at him. But this random vigilante was intriguing him. Quote. Sure, I'll be over in a minute. He quickly texted the others that he was done and wasn't dead. This could be fun to watch. Keep up Kamui. I volunteered for Kaminari, but you're just tagging along. It was fun watching the normally fast hero get slowly worn down. Kaminari, your knee keeps bending inward. Try to keep both knees pointing outward slightly. It's better to be a little outside than a little inside. Fine, he'd advise him too. Quote. Kamui, stop. Watch Kaminari's third step onward. Focus on the legs, then replicate. If you have questions, just ask. The problem with advising anyone other than Kaminari was they didn't listen to him. He knew what he was doing, but no one took him seriously other than Kaminari. Having Kamui here to be a little bitch really raised his appreciation for Kaminari. Good Kaminari, excellent timing. Take a break to drink while I chew out Kamui. Kaminari gave him another salute, then tried to grab the tossed Gatorade and instead fell on his ass as the trash beneath him showed that it wasn't the sturdy foothold he had thought it was. Quote. Now then, you. His tone switched on a dime. Are you just here to piss me off? Learn, or leave. For a vigilante, you're awfully confident in your techniques. Kamui had asked to be there, and he really wanted him to leave. Who knew if this idiot would call the cops or more heroes? Didn't matter because he only devised ways to escape from the beach, but it was the thought that counted. Quote. No shit, I'm a martial artist. He was about to brain this guy upside the head but thought of something more humiliating. Hey, you know, you're pretty confident in your own techniques. How about a bet? He pointed toward Kaminari. Think you can beat a first-year hero course student? We'll train for 1 more hour, and you can keep sitting on your ass. The very idea of fighting a hero student was ridiculous. We could go for a lot of different rules, but I'm thinking the first contact to the body. Shoulders count. How about it? It was clearly rigged. That played immensely to Kamui Woods' strengths. His super move was designed to hit quickly and hit the body early. I need to train him, after all, and he won't get stronger without a good opponent. If you're not going to listen to me, how about helping out a hero student? This spun it to not be about himself, but about Kaminari. Sure enough, the bait was taken. I think I could do that. Quote. Good. The idiot didn't think to ask what he'd be getting if he won. Let's go for 3 tries, and if Kaminari hits you once, it's his win. You hear all this, Kaminari? Yes sir, I gotcha. He nodded vigorously, making Ronin smile. Quote. Excellent. How much of your quirk can you use right now? So I can use my quirk on selective parts, but only a little bit. Kaminari held up a sparking hand to make his point. And if I use my quirk too much, my brain gets overloaded. Quote. Can you do 2 different areas? Like both hands? Kaminari nodded and held up weak sparks in both hands. Does your power output increase the more area you use, like your whole arm? Quote. Probably. Kaminari started with 1 arm, then let the area increase to his entire forearm. The sparking light seemed a little stronger. It then increased again up to his shoulder and was definitely brighter. It seemed the more of his body was creating sparks, the more sparks each part made. Now, try it with both arms. This took a lot of concentration, so Kaminari started from the hands again. A few dainty sparks flew, then as the electricity spread across his body it grew more intense. Keeping it just to his forearms took a lot of concentration, but it was as powerful as 1 full arm. Not that it was useful, since he couldn't even move right now. Just something to practice. Something he could work with. Excellent work Kaminari, excellent. He was starting to get used to what any self-respecting hero who learned martial arts had to do, getting used to his quirk. Kaminari was the first person above the age of 10 Midoriya had met who hadn't already adjusted and gotten used to their quirk. He almost always used it as all or nothing, from what he'd seen. He'd been researching his pupil and his performance in the sports festival. Most people would adjust to their quirk by round 6. This would stop accidents like if Bakugo accidentally exploded while combing his hair and hitting himself in the face. Then, most people would get used to their quirk by age 10. This was when they could use their quirk easily in day-to-day life, and when most people generally figured out what their quirk did, like how Kaminari charged phones with his quirk. Kaminari didn't explore his quirk beyond its basics and never tested his limits. By only using all or nothing, he severely limited himself. Even a tenth of his full power across his entire body was still a deterrent to being hit, and would increase any damage he dealt while fighting hand-to-hand. For some reason, Midoriya felt a vague connection with being unable to properly stand or use one's own power, despite the fact he never having any. It was like owning a car and refusing to do anything other than the bare minimum or flooring it. Kaminari lacked finesse, and Midoriya aimed to fix that, 1 drill at a time. I don't suppose you know how muscles work, do you? It was a hopeful question, but that hope couldn't stand before Kaminari. Quote. Magic. What made it worse was how confused he looked. It would have been better to just say no. God, Kaminari looked so desperate, trying to read the face he couldn't see. Was this how he looked when he tried to read Eiko's mood? Quote. Science, sorcery, quirks, God, am I getting closer or further? Electricity. The answer I was looking for was electricity. He found a relatively intact seat and rested his legs as he explained. By using your quirk and nerves, you should be able to move your muscles faster than other people. Really? Wow. At least do a little research before you agree. I might be right for now, but who knows about next time? What does that have to do with hitting Kamui Woods? Quote. It should make you faster, but we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. For now, I just want you to focus on what we're already talking about and polish your first step. Midoriya gestured for him to get to it. For the next 10 minutes, we're just going to work on that first step. After that, well, we'll skip to your last step. We can define the other steps more later. Kaminari nodded, then grabbed his sword and got into position. Kamui watched on, unsure of what they were trying to do. How could you make a tactic when your enemy was watching? Besides, Kamui's quirk countered Kaminari's. Or so it would seem. Remember to push the Saya back. That will help you draw faster. Ronin's eyes were clearly focused, but invisible. The way he worked Kaminari was impressive. It made sense now why you wanted Kaminari to have an opponent. By giving him an opponent, it gave the kid something he needed to work on and learn. Kamui would force the boy to not rely on his quirk, which seemed to be an electric quirk. He didn't pay attention to him at the sports festival, he wasn't sure. Focus on where you put your feet. You're putting a lot of weight on them, and slipping could throw the entire attack off. Yes, excellent. Ronin sat calmly, confident in his pupil. He gained and lost nothing from this battle, but no matter what his student would gain something. And now that he watched, it was clear they shared a style. Kaminari's martial arts were like the unfinished version of Ronin's, like a new Ronin in the making. Don't slow down at the end of the attack, Kaminari. Push it as far as it will go. Yes. Excellent. It wasn't really excellent. Kamui had seen tons of goons with a better motion. Kaminari was just stepping forward and swinging his sword once, then sheathing it and doing it again. There had to be a trick to it, but was the trick just that Ronin wanted his pupil to go up against a hard opponent? How are you feeling? You ready? The kid had barely changed anything from when they started, and after seeing Ronin's technique, it was like seeing someone move in slow motion. It just didn't seem fair. Yeah, why was the kid going along with this? Didn't he realize who Kamui was? Ronin pulled Kaminari close, then clapped him on the back. Are you sure? You'll only get one chance, after that it won't work. You think you can do it? Kaminari nodded, then smiled. Yeah, I got this, don't you worry. Why was Kamui worried more than the teacher? Failure was a learning opportunity, but this seemed cruel. Midoriya wasn't enjoying this mask, because it couldn't hide how smug he felt. Kamui was about to look like a dumbass, and he wished he could film this guy getting his ass handed to him by Kaminari. They'd start 10 paces from each other, per Kaminari's own request. They stood back to back with Kaminari, a jumbled mess of nerves. However, right now, Kaminari didn't know it, but he had this in the bag. It was going to be fun, if a little annoying, to watch this newfound confidence. 10 paces, go. When you hit 10, attack or whatever. He sounded bored, but he knew that this was going to be hilarious. Kamui clearly hadn't paid enough attention to Kaminari, only focusing on the vigilante. Right now though, he wasn't a vigilante, he was just a teacher, and he aimed to teach this idiot some humility. Did he want to support terrible heroes? He'd show him terrible heroes. They walked away, neither one moving quickly. Kaminari was a bundle of nerves, shaking with every step. Kamui was calm and relaxed, even if he wasn't used to fighting on uneven ground with his opponent. That'd be one of his downfalls. They hit 10 steps almost simultaneously, and it happened. Kamui turned and started talking like an idiot. Lacquered chain pre. Bang. It seemed, as the sword was shot out of the sheath and clocked him in the stomach and knocked him on his ass, Kamui Woods would never get to use LC secured chain prison while Midoriya was around. Mount. Lady ruined it, Kaminari ruined it, and now indirectly Hatsume and Kaminari ruined it. Midoriya's sheath shot his sword straight out of the sheath and straight into Kamui. All Midoriya had to do was tell Kaminari how to aim the sheath from the hip, then tell him to pull the trigger without grabbing the handle. To make it even worse, Kaminari walked up and touched the confused hero with his hand. You alright dude? Dude. Ronin, I think I killed a pro hero. He laughed as Kamui slowly rose, trying to figure out the fuck just happened. Then you're the worst killer I've ever seen. Get your sword Kaminari, something that weak won't kill him. It was true. Kamui was naturally resistant to blunt attacks like getting shot in the stomach by a sword and only being hit by the pommel. Plus, the force went down so much from the original bullet it wouldn't kill a normal person. Hurt like hell, but he'd need to upgrade to a stronger firearm type to make it dangerous. Quote. What? Kamui Woods wasn't dazed because it was painful, but because he had no idea what just happened. Midoriya took back the magazine from Kaminari, laughing. You lost, obviously. Now Kaminari, remember, only self-righteous idiots fight fair. Fuck fighting fair. Kaminari nodded as he spoke. Can you not win in a fight? Change the fight. Ganging up on someone isn't only cheap, it's effective. Sneak attacks are cowardly, despicable, and God's gift to warfare. If at first you don't succeed, run away and try again later. He turned from his apprentice and looked down at Kamui. Now then, about that bet. I don't think you're going to want to leave yet. His mouth wasn't visible, but his venomous smile was obvious. I think I got something fun for you to do, loser. Kaminari watched amazed as Ronin went in depth with Kamui and what he wanted him to do. He could be so inspirational sometimes, and right now was one of them. Kamui was now doing the running drills with them. Focus. This can't be harder than all those flips you usually do. Ronin usually only ran with his explosive technique, but he was forcing them to improve their endurance now. Kaminari, you're dragging your feet. Don't waste energy. The three of them ran, with Ronin behind them to make sure they weren't doing anything wrong. Running in the sand felt weird, but it was a pretty good workout apparently. Kaminari smiled, glad he picked someone so eager to train him. He'd been worried he might be doing something weird, but other than running until his legs felt like they were going to fall off, it all made sense. Anytime it felt weird, Ronin could tell him what the point of the exercise was and wouldn't stop explaining until he was satisfied. This was because the thunderclap and flash was very tiring to do over and over, and it built up leg strength so it could be done more easily. You wanted to tag along, then you'll train. Get your feet up. Ronin and Kamui didn't seem to get along well, but Ronin taught him just as well as he taught Kaminari. They broke, and Ronin handed out drinks to both of them. Excellent work you two. We're going to be going over more moves next time Kaminari, but right now I'm done. You can go home, but you. His gaze snapped to the other person. I said I'd teach you, so finish the water and get up. I don't think I've ever seen you kick, and I aim to fix that. I want to see you get those legs up if it kills both of us. Kaminari waved goodbye, glad that his mentor and the number 11 pro hero got along so well. He couldn't wait for tomorrow. Chapter end notes. Yo, been a while since I read the first chapters, and decided I might do a mix of the old notes and the new notes. Old ones had writing advice, new ones just talk about things in the chapter. The new notes are way easier to write. So I'll start with them. A quick checkup with Inko Midoriya, then moving on to the meat and potatoes of this chapter, actually describing Midoriya's thunderclap and flash version and the return of Ronin, sneaking in a hint of that old note in here. To describe the step count, the number of steps is how long it takes to reach top speed. For the thunderclap and flash TCAF, the less steps the better. This means it needs less room to build up to top speed and is done more quickly. Midoriya's is 7, and Kaminari's is 11. Taking more steps means putting less energy into each step but adding more steps, which Midoriya used to create a new, for now unnamed attack sacrificing room and speed for multiple bursts of the attack chain together. For Kaminari's victory, imagine you get to watch a swordsman train for an hour then fight his younger brother, who's obviously weaker. His power is useless against yours, and he even gets 3 chances to win. He's probably not going to lead with his ace. You stand in front of each other, but as you both go for your weapons he pulls out a gun and decks you. That's Kaminari's win. Also, most heroes wouldn't be used to fighting against guns. The reason Ronin runs into guns so much is that he chases them down since they're a big problem for him and he wants to stop their distribution. Now for the old school writing tips from someone who thinks they're smart but actually isn't. People might have noticed that while other people have called Midoriya Ronin, he hasn't called himself that in a while. The name Ronin and the mentality violence are heavily tied together, and they aren't the same without each other. The reason Ronin hates the heroes is in chapter 3, right before the end. When I'm writing, I come up with small little arcs. They're not huge, and they don't do much, but they're little stepping stones in the story of Ronin. Every arc should change something in the story, even just a little. Wake up call arc CH1-3 Midoriya decides to do something with his life. Nameless arc CH4-8 Midoriya decides to be a vigilante, fights Tatsun Lovers first time Tatsun Lovers arc CH9-15 Midoriya realizes ambushes are amazing, and he isn't hot shit formation arc CH16-21 Midoriya begins to put together the major parts that will form Ronin. The Kanabo, the mask, and the weapons. All for one arc CH22-26 Midoriya learns of all for one and creates the first possessed item Yamato. There are other mini arcs, but these are enough to make the point. Even in a larger arc, put minor developments. Your characters shouldn't just get stuff, they should learn and develop through stories. If you want to follow the canon plot, good for you, but try to make it suit the characters, not the other way around. People change over time, and one of the things I hate the most is stories that just give our heroes power after power without forcing them to try and use them in weird ways. Your gun sheath is for an attack. Why not make it an attack on its own? We'll call it joke style third form, cheater's draw. Chapter 55. Chapter summary. The persona of Ronin returns, albeit briefly. Training hero students. Training heroes. Overall, training. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya didn't mention why he was going to be missing class for the next week, just that he was. His teachers were fine with that, he already finished all their courses. He'd be moving on soon, it was just a matter of time. Nobody doubted he'd be number 1 in their class, hell, he was probably the only person in the whole school who'd take the test seriously. Midoriya waved goodbye to what might have been a tearful Eiko, but it didn't make sense that she'd cry. They barely knew each other past being club members. He was probably just bad at reading the room. Now, he got back to what he wanted. Training himself. He hadn't gotten any time to yesterday, or at least, hadn't gotten to train what he wanted. Right now he practiced his seesawing cuts, pushing it forward slightly as it rose up or down. As the tide rose, he pushed up and outward to get as much distance as possible. As the tide fell, he pulled downward and inward to get as much power as possible. His spear snaked from side to side, going from a sideways cut into a thrust. He breathed slowly and steadily, every thrust lining up with a breath. It was rapid and light breathing and heavily worked the shoulders to move so quickly. He could feel the improvement though. His thrusts and cuts seemed to form a dance, as he wanted. If the slash dimension was the formless art of everything Weeping Demon had taught him, and true violence the formless art of violence, this new dance would be his amalgamation of all the spear arts he learned. Didn't have a cringy name yet though, so he'd need to fix that before it was a real super move. Midoriya patted himself down with a towel. It was becoming hotter by the day. Finals were approaching, and he was feeling confident. Today, he'd pick up Kaminari and they'd practice moving and quirk usage. It was downright insulting how little work they did for Kaminari over there, it was like he went to Ishimi with Midoriya. They didn't teach him to use his quirk or any real tactics, just how to thrash around until you either won or lost. Rules upon rules, with no actual method of implementing them. Now, knowing the rules for arresting a criminal was fine, but first, you had to be able to arrest the criminal. Every single one of those brats, precious as some of them were, would probably die on the first day if they did what he did. And they were supposed to be the experts. How many of them would get domed because they had to shout out stupid names? Their attacks weren't even complicated. He used the attack names to remember what it was about, what style is used, and he still didn't even shout the name. Midoriya finished meditating and jumped up. He had more thrusts and slashes to try out. If he wanted to make this a real style, he wanted at least 4 moves in a super. And only one way to learn more moves. More training. Kaminari was the only person in class. And it wasn't even a real class, it was just him and Nezu. They just sat there, staring each other down. How awkward was this shit? Even Mina wasn't here. Seriously, what gave? He was sure she was doing worse than he was. Had he been betrayed? Quote. Try not to look so heartbroken, Kaminari. Nezu was working on a very large binder, humming to himself. You're not in any trouble. This is actually more about Ronin. He thought it over, and he started to get it. You mean because Ronin has to do his job right now? Nezu nodded. Exactly. While the heroes are still getting paid while doing this, Ronin isn't. So he still has to do his job while the others go out and intern in the morning. It's still more than I thought he was going to do, mind you. Can't you just pay him? He works for you after all. Kaminari begged. Please. Quote. He what? Nezu blinked rapidly, confused, but it was obvious his confusion went over his student's head. I met him when he was on duty guarding your basement or whatever during the entrance exam, and he showed me to the bathroom. Come on, just let me go to the basement even if I can only hang out with him. He definitely has something for me to do. Nezu processed this. He hadn't quite heard everything back when Ronin first showed up in UA, but his memory helped him relive the parts he did see and hear. Ronin escorted Kaminari to the bathroom during the entrance exam, they exchanged a few words, then they split. So Ronin had definitely come from the basement, and when caught he used the excuse he worked here. That's why Kaminari thought to ask him if he could take Ronin for the apprenticeship. This kid didn't even realize who Ronin was, and just thought he was a security guard. Ronin certainly had the skills. You usually had to be better at fighting than the people you were guarding, and how many people were on Ronin's level? Other than All Might, it'd be a tough matchup. Kaminari believed Ronin was a member of the UA faculty, which made sense since Ronin only came by when he was allowed and was supposed to. Since he never saw the teachers fight him, he'd never put together that they weren't on the same side. Any disagreements could logically be flatted as Ronin not being satisfied with his position. Quote. I think. He thought a lot of things, especially right now. He wrote furiously in his sixth binder on Ronin as he spoke. I would like to see what Ronin has taught you so far. Okay. Oh, I get it, you wanna review your employee. Kaminari did finger guns at him. Makes sense. Where are we doing it? Quote. I believe we have a training hall that you could use. Please, follow me. Nezu bowed once, then led onward. Kaminari wasn't sure what he was showing, but it didn't matter. After lining his feet up, his entire upper body went limp for a moment, slumping forward before retightening and pushing off. Just as he slumped and breathed out, a faint smile passed his face. He wasn't sure how good he was, but he could at least get the opening down. The legs tensed, the body leaned, and his arm twitched. Only after all that, he'd breathe out. His kickoff relied on both legs pushing off, but one leg pushing off longer than the other. It threw the entire body off balance and leaned it to one side, but leaned it forward to better impart momentum into the second push. That kick, his second kick, corrected his course. The third corrected it further. The fourth onward was purely for speed. Each kick was coming from the outside of his body, to push him forward faster and faster in as straight of a line as he could manage. His eyes were closed, focused on breathing out. He remembered his master's arm. Every time he did it, he'd cross his arm on the final moment to push that arm. He didn't know why, but he'd been beside his master long enough to know it did something. His eyes were still closed. He finished his first breath out, going over the motions in his mind. He then began to breathe in, taking as much air as his body could handle. Only then did he speak, opening his eyes faintly. Quote. Thunder breathing. First form. Thunderclap. Bam FWUP tilde. His entire body flew. The distance was irrelevant. It was as far as he could go. He heard his feet slam off the floor. It was soft, like the beach. That would slow his movement, but he could use that softer ground to force our feet to get a better grip with every step. Kaminari. Ronin started every lecture with that line, going over the basics. Every time they took a break, he'd slip something about it in. His clothes flicked about in the air as he dove forward, remembering the image his master drilled into him. They hadn't known each other long. They hadn't met more than 5 times. But that man wasn't bothered by how he didn't get things the first time, or the second, or even the 100th. He'd just be running right beside him, every step of the way. It was the image of that man beside him he copied now. His sheath activated, pushing his sword out and crossing his body. The hum of the motor, the hiss of his breathing. Swing tilde. It cut through the air and forced him to take a few steps after. His eyes were open, but not concentrated. And flash. Nezu looked at where Kaminari started, then where he ended. Then where he started, then where he ended, then where he started, and then